With Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, be advised that a notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board in Town Hall and forwarding to the officially designated newspapers that this meeting would take place at Town Hall at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, September 19, 2023. Meeting details and the draft agenda were also posted on our Township website. Please all stand to salute the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Ms. Prupus?
Here.
Ms. Romano?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Banayak?
Here.
Mayor Miggins?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the August 30th, 2023 Special Township Committee minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? May I have a motion to approve the September 5th Township Committee minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? May I have a motion to approve the September 5th, 2023 Special Township Committee minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, no abstentions. Thank you. Reports, we're going to start with reports this evening. Ms. Prupus, do you have any reports for us? No reports. Mr. Cohen, any reports for us?
Just briefly, I mentioned this before, but now we have our official flyer from the Arboretum Committee. We're having a cornhole tournament on Sunday, October 22nd at the Boxcar by the Short Hills train station from 12 to 4. Registration for teams of 2 is now open. I have a flyer up here. There'll be one posted downstairs with a QR code. So I would encourage people to sign up and register. It'll be a lot of fun. And all proceeds go to the Arboretum.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Mr. Vinayak, do you have any, Deputy Mayor Vinayak, any reports for us, sir?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I have 2 reports mainly, one from flood mitigation. We had a meeting last week, and I'm going to give you an update on flood mitigation, what we discussed in our meeting as well. So there's a piece of good news is we had applied, a couple of homes or few homes have applied for home elevation program. There's a preliminary approval for that home elevation is done, so it's moving the right direction. So it's going on to the next level. Once approved, 80% of the cost will be paid by the government, state or fed, FEMA. And then 20% will be paid by the homeowner. And the home will be elevated to a level where it will not flood the main level. And I'm very happy because the houses that were flooded on the main level in Glenwood, in South Mountain area, those are the few houses that is on the application that have filled the application up. So it's a great news for Township. While we are working on bathymetric survey for the Turtleback Zoo waterfront, that is on the agenda today. Once it gets approved, it's already approved by the City of Orange. And that'll get done in November. November date, I think, is 12th. By then, it should get done. So while we are working on a bigger project, there were few things that we had done in the township here. And that was, we did 2 piping projects, and the third is on the way. We met with the residents last week, and Mr. McDonald can give you that update on how that went for the third piping project. The other 2 piping projects that were done and finished and completed, they are actually performing very well. I've spoken to the residents as well myself directly. It is when the rain happened in the past, their backyard used to float or get so much water. Now it's actually getting away through those pipes really quickly. So water is still coming in, but it's drying it out quicker or taking it out quicker than what it used to be before. So hopefully with the third pipeline project, the South Mountain area that was flooded the most, will get some relief. While we're working on the bigger project where after the bathymetric survey, and which is how deep is that waterfront or water reservoir. Once we know if it's 20 feet or 30 feet, we are trying to work on a project with the county and with the city where if there's a forecast for a heavy rain or storm, they will reduce the water level. And it is how quickly the water comes and accumulates here. So once the water level is low, and when the storm comes, the water level will increase and not flow or overflow right away like it used to do. So that is a bigger project that we are still working on, but the things that we had under us is moving quicker. So I'm happy to actually say that pipeline project is doing good, and the home elevation program is also preliminary approval has been done. Okay. Next is I'm also part of sub-finance committee along with Mr. Cohen. We, our CFO and our business administrator, Mr. Matt Larcy, our CFO, and Alex McDonald, business administrator, they've done a great job. Last 3 years, we have been working to get budgeted versus actual monthly report. And it is at a very deep level, not just at a department level, but even within the department line item level, how we are doing, how we have been doing. So I'm actually proud to announce that this is now shared with the entire TC every month, or will be shared. It's been shared last couple of months, and it will be shared with the entire TC going forward. It is the information that we worked over 3 years, proved it over and over again, and we were just looking at the finance subcommittee ourselves. Now the entire TC has access to that. It actually tells you the yearly budget on that line item and how we've been doing. Just for simplicity, we have divided that yearly budget into 12 buckets. There are some seasonal items, you will see some lower or higher, but overall how that is trending, you can actually see it monthly. And it's a great tool, great report to actually see. I feel sometimes there are a lot of things not in our control in town, and we keep trying to get those. Finance is one thing that we have total control on. At least we should be looking at that and making it better and more efficient, right? We want to have all the services that we have, but more efficiently. I also reached out to a couple of my coworkers, not coworkers here, but deputy mayor of a different town, Chesterfield. And I spoke with him. They have a budget advisory committee. So sub-finance committee here has 2 TC member, CFO and a BA. In the budget advisory committee there are residents. There are 5 residents who, together with CFO and 1 TC member, sits on and reviews the budget and reviews overall finances for the full year and come up with one budget plan. So there is a residential input, and that creates a lot of transparency. We keep talking about transparency. We keep talking about our legal bill or this bill or that bill. Everything, all the expenses are in the report. So it is now to the level where anyone can see it and actually look into where we can improve on. While we keep talking about, oh, we spent 50,000 here more or 25,000 here more, we have a $65 million budget, operating budget in the town for 20,000 people. We have 21,000 approximately. And there are a lot of different line items that we can improve by being creative, or there could be experiences that could be used from our residents. And I actually feel that we are at that level now where and our town is a great town with a lot of knowledge and information and experience in the finance industry, not managing money, but managing expenses. So if we can get that experiences here, I think it will be a great help to the township and to the professional. And in no means I'm saying we have wonderful professionals here, but it's always good to see with fresh eyes, with township eyes, they have a buy into the process and can work with everyone here and also talk out what they feel about the budget. Some of the things I saw in there, again, I talk about this all the time, over time. If actually I see the budget for different departments. We have overtime budget for police, we have overtime budget for fire, we have overtime budget for DPW, we have overtime budget for vehicle maintenance, and we have park overtime, shade tree overtime. Well, right now, at this time, the yearly budget for police has already been done. We have surpassed the yearly budget for overtime in August, end of August. $850,000 was the budget for police. We have already spent $931,000. And again, this may be needed, this may be required for anything that we do in here and to keep the town safe. But these are what I'm seeing in the last month's report. Fire department that has $525,000 budget for the full year, $350 until the year to date, end of August. They have actually right on the target, $358. So they are trending. Last month was about, I think, in little double digit, they've been in single digit over time. But these all are seasonal as well. So sometimes there is more calls or there are people out that they're covering. But these are the information I think we all need to look into and give your inputs for town to actually make it better. And that's what I say, this is one thing that we can control on. Other things we may not even have control on. So thank you again, Business Administrator, and thank you, the CFO.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other reports, sir? That's it?
Nope, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Romano?
Yes.
Thank
you. Senior Citizen Advisory Committee met earlier this month. The Health Department is going to be offering a flu shot clinic for those 65 and older. Once the Health Department gets the vaccine, the information on dates and times will be announced. This is available at no cost to residents of Medicare Part B, $10 for all others. The hotline is 973-564-7085, and that will be updated once they have more information. Just real quick, summer programs. Senior water aerobics was very successful this past summer. The program was full. Presentations at the library over the summer. Painting the American Revolution. The creation of Greenwood Gardens, celebrating 20 years. Pharmacy myths, what really goes on behind the counter. Breakfast and bingo, and the admission for that was a donation to the food pantry. And the library also hosted Theater Thursday for our residents. Explore Milburn, the annual meeting will be at 5:30 on Thursday, October 19th here at Town Hall. They will be discussing the 2024 budget and service portfolio and the semi-annual State of the SID. All are welcome to attend. The fall event schedule, Explore's been working very hard developing fall and winter plans. October 31st, Fall into Milburn Short Hills, which will be a Halloween event. Thursday, November 9th, Here for the Holidays, which will be a shopping showcase. November 25th, Small Business Saturday. Saturday and Sunday, December 2nd and 3rd, Winter Village event downtown. Saturday and Sunday, December 9th and 10th, Winter Village at the Short Hill Station with holiday carolers. That is all.
Thank you, Ms. Romano. Mr. Mariziti, anything for us this evening, sir?
Yes, I do. I have a brief report with respect to the affordable housing project. The court has scheduled a status conference for October 3rd of the parties. As you may recall, in May, I believe it was, there was a compliance hearing held before the court, at which time the court granted conditional approval of compliance by the township with the terms of the settlement agreement. And the condition of that approval was that the township complete the tasks with respect to the implementation of that project. And that listed in the order that there be a redevelopment plan adopted by a certain time, and that has happened. That there also be a redevelopment agreement between the township and RPM successfully negotiated. We're past that time. We have until the middle of October to meet her deadline. And there's also a requirement that there be a negotiated payment in lieu of taxes agreement which will require the adoption of an ordinance. So we have work to do, and we will be talking about all that to the court. We will be needing to get more time to finish all that work.
I guess I do have a question for you where that's concerned then. If we have until the middle of October to have this resolution for them, why are they calling a meeting before that?
I think I can't reach into the mind of the court, but I think she wants to see what's happening and perhaps put us on another schedule. Well, that's the purpose of the status conference.
Is that normal?
It's
That
very
they would
normal.
have a meeting before the deadline's even passed?
It's very normal for a court to want to have a case management conference or a status conference on adherence to outstanding orders. I don't think it's unusual. I've been informed about this by Jared Cantor, who is your special counsel. He may have more insight into that exactly than I do.
I just thought it was odd that we haven't passed the date and they're calling us into court already.
Well,
That was all.
I should explain that a little bit further. We had a date that could be extended without going back to the court with the consent of the parties, that is Fair Share and RPM, our developer. They have not consented. So we are going to have to go back to the court in any event for an extension of this.
Ms.
Who's
Prupus?
they? Is it both Fair Share and RPM? or
That's
just one
right.
of them?
Both.
Neither of them consented.
Neither of
To the
them
extent.
have consented.
Got
Anything else, Mr. Marizzi?
No, I have no further.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald?
Yes, just to piggyback a bit on Deputy Mayor Vinayak's report on the flood mitigation advisory committee. As he has stated, on September 14th, we did meet with the residents at Greenwood and Ridgewood, which is the third project area for a drainage project. It was a good meeting, a lot of good questions from the residents. And what we've surmised from that is that there is a consensus for us to begin moving forward with a conceptual idea of that drainage project and start discussing what the needs from the township would be in terms of easements. So that will be forthcoming. Today, I actually heard from the Army Corps of Engineers that they had their internal meeting on the alternative milestone. The New York District was successful and met the milestones and can now move forward with an alternatives analysis. They are planning a public NEPA scoping meeting a few months from now. They'll convey that to us when there's a little bit more information. But right now they're going to start developing those alternatives. And the Orange Reservoir was already updated that the access agreement is on tonight's agenda for the Township Committee, and that the City of Orange Township has already passed that to allow us to do a bathymetric survey, which would tighten up data as it relates to the proposed bypass solution at the Orange Reservoir.
Alex, did McDonald give us a proposal? Are they doing that work?
For the bathymetric survey?
Mhm.
No, it's an RFP.
Oh, so okay.
Yeah, so it'll go out for a request for proposals. We'll receive those and then,
And is
because there's
Milburn-
specific engineering firms that do that work.
Is Milburn gonna pay for that solely?
Correct.
Did you guys ask any of the other towns in the Rahway River Mayor's Council, depending on what that cost is, if they want to contribute?
So we did not, because this, when we brought sort of the draft study to the Mayor's Rahway River Council, which they did help pay for, the benefit that is projected to the downstream communities is not significant, and that they are, that the benefit to downtown Milburn and Milburn in particular is significant potentially, again, based, depending on the data that we gathered from this bathymetric survey. Now, that is not to say that if a bypass solution moves forward, that they would not potentially contribute to that. But I think that it is a far cleaner process and for us to engage with the City of Orange Township and go through this study on our own.
Do we have any idea what that study will cost?
Yeah, it's projected to be about between 30 and 40,000.
And then do we have an idea of what the bypass
Well, that's a little far out to project, but yeah, but I think, early on when they were first discussing this several years ago, it was projected to be approximately 5 million, but I think you could assume that that is more than that.
And when did they find out that the downstream towns that benefit wasn't there? Is that new knowledge?
No, this is during one of the meetings that we were discussing the study that Mott McDonald had done without having that solid information so it may change, quite honestly,
Was
it may
that study
change.
done last year?
Yes,
Kind of determined where the
Correct.
benefit would be.
correct.
Got it.
Just an update that we are still doing some of our 2023 road reconstruction projects, in particular Fairfield Drive, as well as Wyoming, and the Township's Department of Transportation project, which is Myrtle Avenue. This year will be commencing in the fall here. More information will go up on the website and obviously out to the residents. It's Myrtle Avenue from Glen Avenue to the Maplewood border. And that is a DOT grant funded project. Just a little bit of good news. I know it had come up at a meeting previously, but we now have an AED installed on the first floor of town.
Hopefully we never need it. From the rec department, just so everyone knows, the Milburn Recreation Swim Team, the Bluefish, went 8-0 this summer. And so they were given an award at the rec meeting. There was a nice crowd that showed up. There probably, I think there's 100 kids or 120 kids on the swim team. So kudos to them. And then also I don't believe it's too late to sign up for the Tour de Milburn, the bicycle tour.
It is.
It is too late to sign up. It is too late to sign up. However, come on out and cheer everybody on. That's going to be on Sunday, 9/24. So Milburn Avenue will be closed.
There will be some traffic impacts as a result.
Yes,
But it's 8:30 and 9, I believe, are the ride times. So
8:30 and 9. So by noontime, we should be open before that.
By 9:30, Milburn will be.
Okay, so just note that you won't be able to get downtown Sunday, the 24th for 2 hours or so. And that is it for me for reports. And so now I'd like to announce our Milburn School Superintendent, Dr. Christine Burton, is here with us, and School Board Administrator Cheryl Schneider. They requested a few minutes to speak on the upcoming school referendum. So ladies, by all means, Ms. Dries, I don't know if you're joining them as well or you're here for support, but okay. Thank you very much. Good evening, Dr. Burton.
Good evening.
Ready? Do we have a slideshow for you?
Yeah, one more.
Okay. Maybe.
There we go.
Okay.
So thank you to the Township Committee to come before you this evening to share just a few highlights on the November referendum. So school districts do have limited ability to fund major capital projects through their normal annual budgets. So many school districts, including Milburn, have developed an approach whereby we raise debt through the sale of bonds to fund major projects. And so the plan for this year is to raise $13 million in debt through a bond sale to fund the complete renovation of the high school auditorium, renovate science labs, nurses suites at 2 of our elementary schools, a series of restrooms, as well as roof and HVAC replacements. As a reminder, we had a successful referendum in 2016 and 2020 for the purchase of the Washington School, a gym and cafeteria at the middle school, media labs, security vestibules, and air conditioning in our elementary schools. So I do, again, thank the community for their support in those projects. All schools did benefit from these referendum projects. When we conduct a referendum, the projects may qualify for state aid of up to 40% of the cost. And so all projects in this referendum qualify for this state aid. So there is no increase in taxes. A portion of your taxes is always paying down the debt. And so we issue new debt to achieve a level debt service amount, as the graph shows. So the question will be on the general election ballot on November 7th. For the referendum question, important to note, you want to take the ballot, flip it, find it, and vote on it. It's up on the back of the ballot. If you want more information, I have flyers this evening that you can take. You can also hear me. I did this presentation last night. I'll be doing it again on October 2nd, October 16th, November 6th, as well as live streamed and in person over at the Ed Center. You can check out our website, and we'll also be on the lookout for a mailer of information that will be coming. And we hope to again have the community's continued support for referendum 23 as we are setting the stage for the future.
Dr. Burton, quickly, thank you very much for coming out and telling us this. So you're saying the question is on the back of the ballot. So the front of the ballot is the municipal part, and on the back of the ballot is where you'll find that referendum along with the school board members who are running. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And if one were, it's a simple yes or no question, either yes, you want this referendum, or no, you don't wish for it.
That is correct.
No trick questions. Okay, great. Anybody have questions for Dr. Burton? Thank you for coming out this
You're very
evening.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Now we're going to go to a special report for the environmental remediation options for the 9 Main Street property. So Paul Drucker, who is from VHB Environmental, is going to give a brief overview of the options, and then for the committee to discuss, and then the next steps. So Mr. Drucker, thank you so much for coming.
Let me just do it here.
Yeah, that'd be great. We thought it was important that the township hear everything that we get to hear from a transparency perspective. So you hear what we're hearing in terms of the soil, what's going on with the soil, what makes the most sense for the soil, where the 75 unit project is getting built at 9 Main Street. So we asked Mr. Drucker to please come out and explain to everyone. So thank you.
Great, thanks for having me back. As Maggie said, I'm Paul Drucker. I'm a licensed site remediation professional with VHB. We were originally contracted, maybe 2 years ago now, to do due diligence of the DPW property, meaning evaluate the feasibility of the property to be used for affordable housing. So we started that process going through the standard due diligence practices in New Jersey, mostly for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection site remediation program. We started with what's called a preliminary assessment, very similar to what's called a phase 1, if anybody's ever heard of that, where you just do data gathering, you get a site history, have there been any releases on the site in the past, have there been any reports that the DP has on file that we could reference to find out, are there any areas on the site that are of environmental concern. So going through that process, we evaluated the entire DPW yard, as you see on that board over there. And afterwards, we focused on the area to be redeveloped, which if you get close, you can see it's in yellow over there. We identified a few areas of concern, such as the fueling station. There was there's various household hazardous waste, vehicle parking, but the main issue is the one we're here to talk about tonight is the fill material. So back in the 90s, the township took material that was excavated from underground storage tanks around town, had it stockpiled there, and then they used that material to raise the grade of the property to create the parking lot. Now, after that was done, the DEP became involved due to other businesses on site with some sort of USTs had to be pulled, and they made Milburn go through the process of proving that the material wasn't impacted, which Milburn did at the time. They sampled the material, DEP was satisfied, they gave them a further action letter for that material. Fast forward to what we did, and obviously if you do due diligence work, you look at that material and say, okay, standards have changed, let's reinvestigate it, which is what we did. And then we went to the site investigation process and the remedial investigation process. So that is where you just sample the material. So we sampled the material for basically unknowns because we didn't really know what would be there. And we found only a couple of instances where there was some contamination in the soil. Mainly it was the volatiles that made that back in the 90s, they said weren't there. We didn't find those. We found some metals, some polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which shorten as PAHs. And there were levels that exceeded some DP standards. So we did further evaluation of how extensive is this problem? How deep does it go? And we concluded that this is basically homogeneous fill material that covers the whole site and is contained within the site. One thing we did do is, if you know this area, there's a berm around here, which contains material from going into the properties over here. That berm is all the native material that was excavated, pushed up, and all the fill material is contained in that berm. So based on what we found, which when you get a closer look, you can see here, the contaminants concerned are benzoate pyrenes, arsenic, lead, mercury. So not. You use test ball.
No, but Paul, just keep,
Sorry.
thank you.
So, so based on what we found, we came to the conclusion that there's two remediation options if you want to develop this property for residential affordable housing, really anything. And the first is capping, which I think everybody's heard before. Capping is that's a cross section of what a typical cap looks like. Capping is you have the fill material on the bottom, you have clean material, either clean fill, asphalt, concrete, sub-based. The DP has a prescriptive guidance, presumptive remedy guidance for, depending on what you want to use the property for, you have to meet this guidance, and you don't need pre-approval if you say you're following this guidance. So if you can see there, landscaped areas, you have to have a minimum 2-foot clean fill layer. Any concrete sidewalk, you need 4 inches of concrete, 4 inches of sub-base minimum, asphalt, same thickness, and the building itself is a cap 2, and that has the same thickness requirements below that. There are other scenarios, but I won't get into the weeds with the utility corridors later. So that is a cap. So what that does is the DP says that precludes, that prevents direct contact to the material if you meet these capping requirements, and then it's suitable for residential housing of really of any kind. In this case, we'd be type 2 because it's not controlled by the residents, it's controlled by, I think it's HOA.
Mr. Drucker, would you do us a favor, please, and just for us on the dais, if you could just flip that around so we could take a look at it
Oh,
as well.
sorry.
That's okay. We thought it was important that the members of the township see it, but we think it's important for us to just take a look, see as well. Okay. Terrific. Good.
So
Okay.
that's the first option, capping. It's a standard practice allowable by the DEP. The second option is excavate it all out. So you guys seen this before. So
Yeah, you could turn that around to everybody then. Thank you.
So based on the data we collected, we did soil borings, and the thickness of this material is in the yellow area, it goes down to about 9 feet. The blue area is somewhere between 3 and 5 feet. So that it's not, it goes like this. So basically, if you want to dig this out, I did just some calculations based on the data we collected. You're looking at removing approximately 9,500 cubic yards to 13,000 cubic yards of material to excavate that out, and you have to replace it with clean material. And then you don't have any permits with the state. It's called unrestricted use, means you can do whatever you want with it, even that the DP is not involved anymore. So it's pretty straightforward, digging and hauling. The actual process is very lengthy. It's probably I estimated it would probably take, depending on which, how many tons there are, it could take 60 days or more to truck it all out. Maybe another 20, 30 days to bring fill material back in. And then the developer can develop it however they want, like it's an empty, clean dirt lot. So that's the short of it. I'm sure you have a lot of questions and a lot more details, which instead of me trying to get in the weeds, I'll take your questions.
Ms. Prupus, do you have any questions for Mr. Drucker?
I know, but we are gonna allow the public to ask questions.
Yeah.
I'm good right now.
Okay.
Mr. Cohen,
Good drive.
Deputy Mayor?
What is the cost difference between the two?
So the costs, please keep in mind that the costs are estimates. This would be some that would be bid out. It'd be, if the town did it, it'd be prevailing wage. If RPM did it, maybe not. That has a big effect on the rates for disposal. So my estimates here are, if on the low end for 9,500 cubic yards, I estimated somewhere around $2.1 million for the excavation. If you go to the high end, which is about 13,000 cubic yards, I estimated somewhere around $2.9 million.
And what about the other option
Well,
where you're capping it?
The capping, that would be a construction cost. So that wouldn't
How
be,
much is that?
it would depend on what the plan is, RPM's plan. I don't know how much concrete, asphalt, it's entirely dependent on what the square footage of each area, the asphalt area, landscaped areas, how big the building is. Because the
Well, I
building
don't-
itself is a cap.
I'm a bit confused now. So if you do the capping, when you do this excavation, you don't need capping?
No, no, there's no capping.
So if you don't do this and you do the capping.
Right.
The extra cost between the regular building that will go up here versus that, you don't know?
No, I mean, it wouldn't be, if it's whatever the construction of, it would be the typical construction of the development plus some sub-base. I don't know what they would use. It's just up to their discretion of exactly how much of each they want to put in, how big the building is. It could really vary. I wouldn't know how to estimate that based,
I thought you
without their
talked
development
about
plan.
There are about 2-3 feet that you'll have to cap it or fill it with the concrete.
Yeah,
pour.
so the,
Mr. Drucker, so are you saying that you don't know the cost, that's something that RPM would have included in their construction costs? Is
Right.
that what you're saying?
yeah, so the cap is a function of RPM's construction cost. So so all these are minimums on there. They might want thicker concrete, they want, and then less sub-base or more sub-base, or they might want a large vegetated area or a large asphalt area. So it can widely vary of what that would be.
This is RPM. If they know an estimated cost in
They
it.
do, it's on the back of the term sheet.
And how much
As
is that?
Mr. Marizini is saying, it's inside their term sheet, which we haven't agreed to, but we don't have that
But
here.
approximately how much
We
is
don't
that?
even, I don't.
Well, there's a total project cost that's identified as an exhibit to the draft redevelopment agreement that's going back and forth with RPM. Those are plug-in numbers, and in those numbers is all of the cost of construction. I think the point is that as part of the project, the building will be built, that will be a cap. The parking will be a cap. Oh, I was saying that as part of the project, the building itself will be a cap. The parking area will be a cap and the sidewalks will be a cap.
That's right.
And my understanding is that what I just described is what consumes most of the site area. I don't know if there's some
Yeah.
landscaping areas. So what we would be, I think what the differential cost, to the extent there is any, is the extent of the concrete that may not be so thick if it doesn't need to be capped.
That's
Right.
what I'm saying. If the
Yeah.
building is coming up with all this excavation and the new swell coming in versus this cap, so what is the difference between the building cost? We heard about the excavation and filling up is about from 2.1 to 2.9.
Yeah.
I'm actually asking this question because, and then we have discussed this in the past as well. We have an affordable housing tax that we have levied on the new housing that is coming up or any house that gets made. If their structure is over half on the new, if the valuation for the structure is over half, they'll have to pay 1.5% of the new valuation. And it's approximately $700,000 to $800,000 collection a year on that. So if the difference is 2.5 or 2 million or 3 million, I'm thinking it's a 4-year payback from that without raising any tax, if that is a safer way of going it. If the difference is even less, I would go with this option, or not this option, sorry, the excavation option. I just need to know the difference between the two.
Hold on
Yes.
a second. Mr. Beneke, I'm going to ask, Mr. Beneke is here as well, and he's the numbers guy for us on this project. Perchance, sir, would you happen to know what that cost is?
Yeah.
And may I know that number, please?
About $1.2 million.
About 1.2 million. So the difference between digging out the dirt can be 2.1 to 2.9, or covering it up to the DEP standards is 1.2 million.
Okay.
This is all approximate, yes?
Just one point, the $1.2 million, as the engineer said, that's site clearance and that's site prep. So there's some of that would be just normal as part of the capping as well. So there's some overlap. So call it $2 million as a bigger difference.
The difference between the two.
$2 million between excavation and capping.
That's
Okay.
good benchmark for your
It's
question.
just isn't it just the cost of the excavation and then the refill?
Yeah, and then the building will come up.
Well, it's also the transport.
Yeah, that,
And the
yeah,
refill, right, but that's what the difference is that we're talking about between the two options.
2 million.
Not necessarily
Or
because
2.9.
the foundation,
No,
the foundation is different. Correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong, the foundation is different.
Depending on which way they go.
That's an allowance to 1.2 million. They could go thicker, for example, and be 1.6 million.
so it is 1.2 to 1.6 on this and 2.1 to 2.9 on the other,
Approximate.
approximately. So the difference between the two is more like 1 million to 2 million.
No, because the 2 million is a good estimate. Short have cost escalators. You have the prevailing wage issue. You have all those types of issues that fill in the blanks another year. So I would think that $2 million should be a pretty good estimate as to the difference.
Thank you, Mr. Beneke. Okay. Anybody else have any other questions? Ms. Romano, anything? I'm good. Mr. Marizini
No, I don't have any.
or Mr. McDonald? No. So, Mr. Drucker, if it's all right with you, could you push this thing down so we can see
Yes,
if anybody has any questions?
Sure.
There may be a possibility that either Mr. Drucker and or Mr. Beneke may have questions from the people who are here this evening. And if you do, please feel free to come up to the microphone. Just give us your name and ask what. Sure. Retime everything. 3 minutes.
Jeffrey Feld, Short Hills resident.
Thank you.
I guess a lot of us are still in the dark because it seems, based on this little discussion that we did here, there's a question of who bears the cost of certain projects. Because I think what we heard before, if it's capping, town will bear the cost. And if it's excavation, they'll be factored into the construction cost. That's the way I heard being presented. As to prevailing wage, that's a very big issue because of the Dobco case that came out about a year ago. And because we are and we're doing this as a governmental project, I have a feeling the way the law is heading, that this project will be a prevailing wage project. And that's something that you're gonna have to consider and to research. But a lot of this is, I feel like I'm still in the dark because I don't know until I see the redevelopment agreement, who bears that cost? Because that's the issue that I don't know, whether we're giving a blank check. That was what a lot of us were wondering, because when we did do this deal, you gave a blank check because there's 100% affordable housing for the taxpayers to pick up the cost. And I think we just need to know a little more detail, who's going to bear the cost, is prevailing wages going to control, and that's because of the Dobco case. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Feld. Does anybody else have any other questions in regards to Mr. Drucker's testimony or Mr. Sure, but I always like to go to who's here.
Hi, Ben Stoller. If there is a issue with the soil and you're taking it out, is the town protected in any manner from a Superfund issue? And who bears that liability? Is it the residents or is it RPM or whom?
these levels of contaminants wouldn't come to us a Superfund issue, but
So you've never seen a Superfund issue in this type of work?
not at these levels of contaminants. But no, these are standard historic fill contaminants.
Okay, that's different than what I heard. And also too, in terms of, is there any way, since it seems that there's no possibility for a Superfund issue, which we all know there probably will be, is there a way to cap the town's exposure by RPM?
Yeah, we'll hold till everyone's spoken and then we can go back to all of them. Ms. Best?
This isn't part of my regular 3 minutes. just-
Nope, this is
Thank
just about
Okay,
this.
just wanna check.
This
I'll
is
make
just
sure.
about 9 Main
Thank you.
Street,
I'll make
ma'am.
it fast. I just have a quick question, well, maybe 2 questions. I wanted to understand, do you have a list of all the contaminants that you could publicly disclose to everybody in this room, including the township committee, that you tested for, so things weren't like excluded? Because, you know, there's like tons and tons of different contaminants and pesticides, et cetera, and benzene, and there's quite a number of heavy metals. Like, did you, test for gadolinium? I highly doubt that's there, but like, did you test for every heavy metal? So I wanted to ask that question first, and then should I just keep talking, or?
Well, why don't you ask your questions, and I think when we're all
Okay, yeah,
finished, we'll,
that's
like we normally do, and then
Thanks,
we'll
Maggie.
answer everybody's question, and
So-
something else comes up, and
and
we
then
can always go back.
I was trying to understand, I mean, he had given a great response on sort of the cost differential, which makes total sense. So is the builder gonna be picking up the cost differential? Like, if you guys choose to pull out the fill and dump it somewhere? I'd just like to understand that, because I feel like the property would be greatly devalued if it's contaminated and is already getting it under market price, because it's devalued, and he should probably take charge of doing that. I don't know, maybe you've already settled that out. That was my only comment.
We
So,
haven't settled that.
okay,
But thank you. Okay, let's speak to that now.
Hi, this is Charu Goyal, Short Hills resident. So I would like to thank you first of all for the great transparency and the details that you have provided. I have a question. The contamination levels which we will be filling up for the better welfare of the residents, will there be a testing which will be done, like, let's say, in few years or like 5 years or so, to make sure that it is at the right level? That's my question.
Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Cole. Test of soil after building.
Hi, I'm Frank Sacamandi, and I'm a Short Hills resident. So I have a few questions. So if we went the route of just capping it, what do you do where, in the areas where the foundation for the building has to go? I imagine the footings have to go down a certain depth, right? So is that going to go on top of the cap? And if so, does that mean that, the building is going to be quite a bit higher than would normally happen? Or are you going to have to excavate areas for the footing? And if so, what costs are there for the remediation? Additionally, if you go the other route to excavate all of the soil, how will you be sure that you got all of the contaminated soil? Are you going to retest? Are you going to go down to a certain level and then retest? And are you going to test for the same set of contaminants that you did initially, or are you going to look for other contaminants? Because it's my understanding that this area used to be a pole yard back in the day. So there could be a whole bunch of other nasty stuff that's further underneath where you guys tested. And then also I wanted to know, I remember from the environmental report, it seemed like you guys also did soil borings in a few specific areas. How did you choose those areas? Because what was interesting is some of those areas that you chose didn't seem to line up with what Trenton had on file of where the contamination was actually dumped. So it'd be good to know exactly how you chose those areas. And then additionally, if you were to excavate everything, what are you going to do to prevent contaminants from coming up in the air and becoming airborne? I understand that there are certain contaminants that, if you did a traditional thing like you do in residential constructions, like wetting down to keep down the dust, that can actually cause them to be more volatile and be released into the air. So how would you deal with that? So it'd be great if we can get some answers to those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sacramento. Oh, we have another. We'll wait, Jess.
Hello,
Good
good evening. My name is Pooja Trivedi Parikh. I live in Short Hills. I just had a question as I was listening. Is there, and I don't know the proper terms, you feel free to correct me, but like the option of fill versus excavating, do one or the other have a better positive impact in terms of mitigating the toxins or the contaminants that are there? I guess, is there one way that would be better, or have less negative impact on the developments or the residents that may potentially live there versus the other? Okay, that's all.
Thank you. I think there are two people online. Mr. Molman, thank you.
Good evening, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. Kung, Dr. Kung.
Thank you. So thank you, and Jerry Kung, Short Hills resident. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to ask some questions. My main concern here is that the middle school is less than 200 feet from this site. And so I did a pretty thorough investigation into the history of this site. In particular, I went to Trenton and looked through all of the DEP documentation. There's a particular part of the site where the proposed housing project is going to be. This is the southern portion. And I'm looking right now, it was called ID 27 backfill, where 1,550 cubic yards of the aforementioned contaminated soil excavated from leaking underground fuel storage tanks was dumped. I did a few calculations because I was curious. I did notice that soil borings number 21 and soil borings number 23 fell within this area. And it was curious because the initial draft of the remedial investigation report actually didn't include any toxicity testing for soil borings 21 and 23. If it did, it was minimal. It wasn't related to the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that are the relevant test for this particular type of contamination. Later on, I had asked the township for why this testing was missing. I was told there was a corruption of the Excel file. I did get the data, but in the end, the data for soil boring 21 and 23 was only done at a depth of 7 to 7.5 feet beneath the contaminated area. So I did some calculations because it's just a standard volume divided by area gives you depth calculation. You take 1,550 cubic yards, you divide by the area of the region, which was 120 feet by 55 feet. You get approximately 76 inches. So just to remind you, the testing was done at 7 feet beneath the ground. 76 inches doesn't get to 7 feet beneath the ground. So the depth of soil boring 23 that you had actually tested actually is underneath the area of known contamination. So the particular area in question where the contaminated soil from leaking underground fuel storage tanks was excavated and then dumped was never actually tested for polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons based on my understanding and the data that I've requested. So could you please explain to us, A, how you determined these areas and the particular depths at which you took the borings, and B, after you determined these areas, how you decided which types of toxicity testing to conduct? Because you did say there was benzoate, pyrene, arsenic, lead, and mercury. And so, my main concern right now is that if we do go about excavating, the middle school is nearby. If it is actually more contaminated than we understand based on, from my understanding, the lack of proper testing, is it going to be more expensive in order to make sure that the middle school students are safe from harm? Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Kung. Mr. Molman. We have some minutes.
Oh, good evening, Perry Urso, 514
Evening.
Melbourne Avenue. I don't have the terminology as Dr. Kong did, but I do have a couple questions as where did the date that was used from the 1990s? Is there any data prior to, or was their only requirement is to go back from 1990 to current? Because I'm sure that there's other things that were used on that property that were dumped. And I'm just curious to know if, if there was any testing done prior to 1990. And I don't know where that date came from or who instructed, or if you're only required to go back to 1990, but I would just be curious to prior years. Also, I just wanted to ask, our BA, if he could explain, going back to the acquisition, the property acquisition of the Rimback, what was the purpose of that property acquisition? Was this initially to satisfy the affordable housing that's now used as a parking lot? And also when you're talking about liabilities, and I know a couple people from the public stood up as far as the liability and who's responsible. Is there any responsibility that lies and falls on these members, the sitting members that are approving these types of I'm sorry, but approving any of this laws or using the just approving this a project? I mean, is there any liability that falls on these TC members? Because it looks like if there's something that's going to happen in further years, as far as, any type of contamination and people getting sick, I mean, you have people in the public and that are against this project at this particular location. I think that there should be liabilities for everyone else. I understand that, we're taxpayers, but you're making these approvals, and I think that there should be some liability. And I truly think that these decisions will fall on you. And to have Millburn known as satisfying our affordable housing on a town dump you have to own it. And I really think that you should be looking into and asking your BA what the Rimback purchase, what was the purpose of that purchase. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Urso. Anyone else up there, Jess? No?
So I just have one question at this point about this project for Mr. Drucker and everybody on the Township Committee and perhaps even our council. I want you guys to think about, if this building is built with the remediation, whatever millions we're going to spend, would any of you want to live there? If you won a lottery and got a free apartment for life, would you want to live there? Would you want to put your grandmother in there? Would you want to put your little puppy dog in there? Would you feel comfortable living in the dump? I want you guys to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Anyone else? Okay. Who wants to start? Mr. Drucker, would you like to start? And then we could have Mr. Mariziti and anybody else have any other, make sure we get all these questions answered.
Sure, so I'll go through these best I can. So the first question was, is there a list of contaminants that we analyzed for? Yes, those are in the reports, they're public documents. And the contaminants we analyzed for were selected based on DEP guidance. DEP has a prescriptive sampling approach you take when you don't know what something might contain. And I'd have to get you that exact list, but that's what we follow. It's in the tech regs. It says, if you don't know, it's volatiles, it's PAHs, it's metals, it's PCBs, pesticides, chromium. I forget what else is in there, but that's in the.
Mr. Drucker, did you say that the list of all of the chemicals that the DEP requires us to test for is in your report?
Yeah, in the Excel file, it's on the left side, it's
Okay.
everything was analyzed
So we
for.
can get that too.
Yeah.
It's on our website already.
Okay.
Great.
And testing the soil after, you wouldn't test the soil, well, if you're talking about capping, so if you cap, what you do is you're required by the permit. So say it's all approved. The DEP issues you a permit, remedial action permit, and every 2 years you are required to inspect the cap, make sure there's no cracking, make sure that whoever's in charge of it didn't dig a big hole and put a swimming pool there or something. And you submit that report to the state certifying that the cap is still protective of human health and the environment. So that's so that you don't actually retest the soil. Is that okay? The footings, excavations. Yeah, the footings, it's very common with these buildings that there will be footings or maybe a basement. I don't know what the redevelopment plan is, but if they were to put footings in, they would have to take that soil out and dispose of it the same way they would with the excavation of the entire site. And what you'd have to do is you'd have to, I don't know what the volume is, but whatever volume needs to come out, you would analyze it for waste classification parameters that are required by whatever facility you're taking the soil to. And based on those numbers, they would give you a cost and it would go out without knowing exactly how much, without knowing the redevelopment plan, if they even have footings or if they have crawl spaces, whatever. I don't know what that volume would be, so I can comment on what that cost would be. But it is fairly common that when these construction projects come in, they have footings. Let's see, excavate. How you evaluate when it's finished. So we haven't gotten to the remedial action work plan stage yet, which we wouldn't unless if it's selected that we will excavate it all out. What we will do is develop a remedial action work plan, which will discuss, do we need any post-excavation sampling? Do we need any additional waste classification sampling to, which we probably would, because with this volume of material, any disposal facility is going to want they have requirements that per every 1,000 cubic yards, you have to have 1 sample of this, 2 samples of that. And without knowing what facility it's going to, I wouldn't know what those analysis would be offhand.
So similar to when somebody's pulling an oil tank out of their property.
Yeah.
If they have a leaky oil tank or residential, they have to take the tank out and they have to keep digging the soil till they hit clean soil.
Yeah, they get clean
And they have to
sidewall
keep
samples.
testing.
Yeah,
Okay.
the DP will allow you in cases similar to this to pre-delineate. Say, there's one side wall where you don't have data yet. You collect samples in that sidewall, say, okay, we're going to dig up to here. But in this case, with this property, you're digging to the property boundary. So there's really not going beyond that. And as far as vertical, what we found is in all the borings, this all sits on top of competent rock. So there's nothing below the fill material that we found in the borings we've done to date. Soil boring choice selections, how do we choose where we're putting these? So some of it was based on where we had available access to. A lot of it was based off the DEP's guidance for, we used the DEP's historic fill guidance, which was the most appropriate for this, to figure out how many samples we had to take. And we did more than that because the DEP's historic fill guidance is pretty, I mean, you wouldn't have been happy if we collected 4 samples on here, which is basically for the acreage. That's all we probably would have to collect. So we collected at the end of the day, we collected over 30 samples. And we distributed them as best we could based on access, based on where we thought some areas of concern were. So that's how we selected the locations. Yes, dust control. So in any kind of excavation or redevelopment, dust is always a concern. What you typically do is you have dust monitoring equipment it changes every day based on the wind. So you have an upwind, downwind, dust monitoring equipment, and it says based on an OSHA standard, it signals an alarm if you have too many particulates in the air. And if that happens, you wet it down. As far as that creating a worse problem, these concentrations, in my opinion, what we found so far, they're too low to create any kind of vapor concern, and they're metals anyway. These aren't volatile contaminants. So the watering would be appropriate. And somebody asked if one option is better than the other. In the eyes of the DEP, they are both equally protective of human health and the environment. Obviously, one leaves stuff there, but with the capping per their guidance, they consider that protective. So better isn't really, it's hard to say which is better. And the ID 27 waste and SB 21 and 23. So this ID 27 waste, if you look at old drawings of where it was supposed to be placed, was in that area with the berm. But our borings and talking to people who've been on the site were there when that material placed it was spread everywhere. And we verified that with our borings because we found the same material in every boring. Everywhere on site, it was the same color, same texture, same grain size. There was one exception, which is I know I've heard that this 21-23 scenario here is when we went to the middle of that area, the goal was, well, when we went there, we already knew that this material was contaminated. And there's no reason to go any further. We found the benzoate pyrene, we found the arsenic, we found the metals. It said this is historic fill scenario. So we wanted to find out, is it delineated? The plan was to go to the bottom of that area where it's mapped as ID 27 waste and sample native material to see if anything contaminated the native material. just like we did in the berm. We sampled the berm to show that that berm was clean. But when we went to the bottom, it was rock. It was fill material all the way to rock. So what we did is in SB 23, we found a little change in the soil, which has some coal, similar to what you find with the what is it? I think electric coal plant. We sampled that and we analyzed that for everything because it was new. And the other sample we just did for mercury, because mercury is the one we were really chasing at that point. So that's why there's a discrepancy between we sampled for everything in 23 and only mercury in 21. But actually, in both locations, we took 2 samples. We took a sample about 3 feet in each of those and then down to 7 feet in each of those. And 7 feet is when we saw that one change in soil type. So we sampled that for everything.
So 3 feet, you found that 21 and 23,
It's the same material from top to bottom.
and 7 feet, you did not find it because you went all the way down to make sure
Yeah,
after that is not
then
contaminated.
9 feet's rock.
So that's where it answers the
Mhm.
gentleman's question. I think it was
Yeah.
from Dr. Kung,
Dr. Kung said
why
you-
you went 84-inch down versus 76.
Right.
Okay.
So, and the reason why I went 7 feet in both is because at 7 feet is where we found the change in soil. So to have that kind of the same level, have a sample at the same depth. We didn't find it the other one. We took the sample at the same depth because it was the same material and then there was rock. The 1990 data and how far back, I wasn't really clear on that, but the 1990 data is the only data other than the stuff that we collected that we have on that material. And back then they sampled it for the entire pile or what was in the ground for volatiles. Volatiles only because they knew it came from underground storage tanks. And those sample results were all clean. Below the standard. Again, when we did our investigation, because we sampled for everything, that included volatiles as well, and we didn't find any volatiles. So
There's one more question from the resident here was benefit of one to the other, excavation versus capping.
that one is both are protective of human health and the environment in the eyes of the DEP. I can't answer which is better. It depends on what's more feasible for the town. That's what's better, but they're both in the eyes of the DEP equally protective of human health and the environment. If the capping is done correctly per the presumptive remedy, it prevents direct contact to that material.
So let me ask you this question differently. You just mentioned if it caps,
Mhm.
then every 2 years you're testing it if there is any cracking in there or not. If there is any cracking, you go further. More
If there's
than
any
just testing?
cracking, like what typically happens, usually with these remediation permits, there's a fence and the fence fell down, or both these type of situations, the concrete will eventually erode over time or crack, the asphalt will crack. And if you do it every 2 years, you see that before it gets to be a problem, you say you need to resurface this. You need to fix that.
How about on the other one, excavation?
Excavation, it's unrestricted use, there's no 2 year.
There is no 2
there's no
years.
2 year or
Who
anything.
who is responsible for checking it every 2 years?
Whoever is retained as the town, it's on the town, or it's whoever is in charge of the property. Or in charge of the property, and they would hire an LSRP to certify it. They would have to have an LSRP retainer.
And in this case, our PM will own the
RPM
property.
would be responsible for it because they own the property. Okay. Just a quick question for you. Can you help us to understand better, define what a Superfund site is as compared to what this site is?
So a Superfund site is basically a site that is so contaminated that the towns, this county can't afford to clean it up. And you have to go to the EPA to get funds. It's usually in the tens, 20s, millions of dollars, where it's a direct threat to human health and the environment, and there's no money to clean it up.
And since this is your business and have you worked in other Superfund sites?
I have.
You have. Do you consider this a Superfund site?
I don't.
Absolutely not? Okay.
No, Superfund site, it's defined when it gets the funding. So it doesn't, the level of contamination, you have, dry cleaners, you have, the Superfund site I worked on was a military base, or landfills, or big, dry cleaners are the majority of Superfund sites in the state, military bases, Department of Defense, those are the Superfund sites.
Okay.
I have one
I
more
have a question. The cost of the dust monitoring, is that included in the 2.1 or 2.9?
I didn't get into that level of detail. That this is mostly time on site, rates for transportation disposal, contractor costs. Dust monitoring would be very minimal. Some of that in here.
Okay, so
It's just a piece of equipment. You have people out there anyway. it's maybe $1,000.
And are there other costs that you didn't go into other than the dust monitoring?
The costs I didn't go into with the excavation are the removal of the existing fueling station. You have 3 tanks there. I'm assuming that when RPM does this, they're gonna, I don't know who's gonna be responsible for that. I don't want to get into that. That's a different.
But that's gonna have to happen no matter what.
That's gonna have to happen no
But I'm
matter
talking
what,
about
yeah.
more specifically in taking the soil out and then replacing it with clean
Right.
fill. Are there any other costs? Because I didn't know about the dust monitoring. So there's
Yeah.
any other thing
Nothing
not
that's,
included?
nothing that wouldn't be relatively on a small scale, a couple hundred.
A couple
Like
hundred,
a couple
a couple
$1,000.
350,000?
No, nothing like
Just a couple
that.
200.
Only minor, I don't know, extra site visits if somebody needs to go out there. Nothing that would change the significant figure on these numbers.
Okay, and then in excavating the soil, taking it out, is there a possibility that more soil than you're projecting at this point will need to come out?
I don't see how, because we're in
'Cause it's just gonna
excavating
hit
everything
rock?
on the site,
And then-
everything on rock. I mean, there's a chance that my numbers are, instead of 5 feet, it's 6 feet. Because it's the site, the bedrock that we found, it's not flat, it's on a grade. So this is my best estimate on the range, 9,500 cubic yards to 13,000 cubic yards. That's my best range. But when you start digging, you loosen up the soil, it's not as compacted, it always ends up being a little bit more. That's why I went with the 13,000. That's kind of, I tried to take a little bit of that into account to give you a conservative number.
Because there might be areas that there isn't bedrocks deeper down.
It could, bedrock could do this. I don't know, until you start getting down there. It shouldn't do that too badly. This area is not, it's not mountainous or, well, it's part of it, but that where the DPW is.
Okay. And then Joe, are you gonna answer the questions about the insurance and the cost? Who bears it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cullen, anything? Ms. Romano, any questions? You're good, Mr.
I have the same question on the cost. Exactly who's bearing the cost? As far as I know, it was $3 to $5 million township was hooked on. And this cleaning of the site is $2 million extra. And that probably could add from 3 to 5 will be 5 to 7. We were originally looking at RPM owning the site because we don't want to take liability if anything happens down the line, even after cleaning it. So I'd like to understand, because in that same thing, in the overall, RPM was going to go to state and fed to get some money, and we were going to pay with the plan that we were going to go request the money from the government. We had to pay the higher wages, but it was all covered into that $3 to $5 million delta. And if we don't get that money from the state, township is actually on the hook for paying the difference. So
That's right.
it is not RPM's project. It is actually a township project. Affordable housing is making township do this project. So that is where I want to understand and maybe explain it here as well on the finances part of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna start answering the last question, if I may, about whether I would be comfortable living there. And the answer is yes, I would. And I'll put my money where my mouth is. My daughter lives in Jersey City, in an area of Jersey City that has been remediated. She doesn't have a dog, but she has 2 cats and a husband. And I'm very comfortable with that. If I were worried about the health of the people on this project because of what I was working on, I wouldn't work on it. I would not do it. I have been practicing environmental law since it began in New Jersey and the country. I have been involved in dealing with litigation in a number of Superfund sites. This is not a Superfund site. The Superfund site is one that gets on the national priorities list that is identified by EPA. New Jersey happens to have more than any other state because New Jersey stepped forward when the Superfund statute, CERCLA, as it's formally called, was adopted in the 80s. Why? Because when you are on a Superfund list, you qualify, as Mr. Drucker said, for the federal funding. to clean up the site. This is nothing of that magnitude. I'd also say that my partner Joanne Voss and myself, and Joanne is here, work in redevelopment in many areas of the state, Newark, Hoboken, Perth Amboy, and in almost all of those areas, if you're doing redevelopment, you're redeveloping a contaminated site. And these are sites that are contaminated but remediated in accordance with DEP standards for residential use. I don't know of one. I personally do not know of one where there has been a complete excavation, but I want to address the financial and legal issues. It is correct, as has been said, that the township will bear the cost of bringing this project into fruition to the extent that the programs that Mr. Beneke is much more familiar with and expert on than I am, that will provide funding through the tax credit programs, to the extent that those programs do not meet all of the financial needs to get this project built in accordance with the requirements of the court order, the township must step forward. And the expectation has been, as you indicated, that delta is about 3 to 5 million. It could be more or less. And one of the issues about prevailing wage, I agree with Mr. Feld, that prevailing wage is going to be a significant issue here. And it may be that this is a prevailing wage project because in order to qualify for one of the financing programs, the new Aspire program that is operated by the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, that does require prevailing wages. So in order to get that funding source, which is a very attractive funding source, the project would be subject to the added expense of paying prevailing wages. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. So now, how do we evaluate this issue we have before us tonight in connection with our relationship with RPM? We have been negotiating a very typical redevelopment agreement. It's not done, and I expect that we're talking in a public forum, and I want to be careful about my negotiating position, but the document that has been going back and forth for many months contains the typical provisions that the purchaser is buying the property as is. In other words, assuming the environmental obligations. There is a due diligence period that is written into the agreement, which will give RPM the opportunity to do its own investigation, and after a period of time might decide to walk away. We don't expect that to happen because as you look at projects of this type, the levels of contamination here are not eye-popping. The agreement also contains, as drafted and has been going back and forth, indemnification provisions from RPM and release provisions that will release the township of liability, that will indemnify the township for liability. In addition to that, the township has been exploring the possibility of enhanced environmental insurance coverage to provide even further protections. And that process is going forward as we speak. The other issue that has been raised is with respect to the liability of individuals at this dais, township committee members. And I want to assure you that that's absolutely not the case. There's not individual liability that would come as a result of making a decision one way or the other here. The statute in front of me, the quote from the New Jersey Tort Claims Act says, in quote, a public employee and elected officials, we know are employees, is not liable for an injury resulting from the exercise of judgment or discretion vested in him, should say him or her. So that is clear. In addition to that protection, the township has, in accordance with state statute, adopted an indemnification ordinance, which provides the commitment of the township to indemnify any employee or official with respect to any claim that is made against them in connection with their official capacity. Not that it would be necessary to use that indemnification provision because of the fact that this statute provides it clearly. So with respect to the question about who pays this extra cost, because the normal redevelopment agreement, as I said, one we've been negotiating, calls for the redeveloper to purchase the property as is and bear the cost of environmental cleanup. That would be the environmental cleanup that would be acceptable in order to allow the project to go forward. What is that type of environmental cleanup? It's the one that is option one that Mr. Drucker explained. That is the presumptive remedy that DEP has laid out. Now, if we go beyond that, I don't think there's any secret that RPM is going to say, well, if you want to go beyond that, you're going beyond that because of the township's desire. It's not necessary to do. And so I would expect that this couple of $1 million would be added to that 3 to 5 million number we've been using, and would put us in the $5 to $7 million range. And you're perfectly right in saying that there is an affordable housing fund that has been created. It has certain limitations, and there is also an obligation in the settlement agreement that to the extent necessary, the township will issue a bond ordinance to cover the costs that are the gap, I'll call it. Now, with respect to the remediation, we haven't worked all of this through. If you choose the extra level of it, that's something that has to happen right away before anything else happens. And so there's going to be a need for cash up front. So it may be that fund is not going to provide that immediate cash to do it. And so I would think, and I'm looking at Mr. Beneke to wave me down when I'm saying what I'm saying here, but I would think that there's a likelihood that it would be necessary to hit that bond ordinance earlier than otherwise.
It would be like parking bond ordinance where you get the bond ordinance, pay for it, and keep paying back the bond through the affordable housing fund that we have created.
That could be. I don't know those amounts, and I don't know the limitations on that spending plan. There's an approved spending plan to provide for the utilization of those funds. There are certain allocations. It's not all.
I'd like to understand that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure I addressed every question, but if I didn't, remind me what I left out, and I'll try to do it.
You left out where elected officials are also taxpayers.
Yes.
And live in the same community
Yes,
and have the
that's right.
similar issues that every resident has. So just for your information, our issues are the same issues. We have kids going to high school. I have 2 kids going to high school. So your issue is my issue too.
The only question I would speak to is the purpose of the Rimback purchase. And correct, as I recall, the purchase of the Rimback building was in anticipation of a potential redevelopment plan of a large portion of the downtown area and the relocation of town hall. It had nothing to do with affordable housing.
Great, so I think next steps, we talked about putting out a survey to the township.
That is
Yeah.
completely up to you.
Yes, I would
Yes.
say, let's
Yeah.
put a survey out, what they want to do, the excavation versus capping.
Kathy.
If it's a couple of $1 million difference, and every 2 years, it's RPM who's on the hook. But if anyways, it can come back to township. I mean, I feel more comfortable doing the excavation, but it is going to cost extra money. So it is not going to be just my call.
Right.
I would actually like to see the residents, what they feel like doing, and then based on that, we make the call too.
Ms. Romano, any thoughts?
No, I mean, I'm sorry, that's okay. I mean, this is gonna delay. Is that gonna be a problem?
It is going to delay and it's going to need an explanation. And so if there's going to be a survey, or we have to make this decision to finish this redevelopment agreement and to finish the negotiations on the financial agreement. So I will be asked to explain what's going on.
Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also interested in seeing what the public has to say, but, you know, my feeling, I agree with Mr. Benayak that I would prefer to see the excavation. Because when, then it's over and done with, there's no issue with tracking, or 2 years later you find something else and, you know, it's over and done with.
Ms. Prukas?
I want to hear what people have to say.
What the township has,
What the
what the
township has to
residents?
say. Yep.
Okay.
And, but I'm wondering how we're gonna disseminate the information that Paul gave us tonight and how we're gonna educate people on these options.
I think one of the things we can do is make sure that everyone knows that this is on YouTube and that they can download it and listen to it. Probably ending at 8:25, starting at 8 o'clock and ending at
So that should
8:25. That's
probably be in the survey.
sure,
that goes out.
absolutely. Yeah, so that they can watch it and put that in the survey. Is it a simple enough, or is it a simple question? Do you want the ground excavated? Do you want it covered over? Here's the cost difference approximately. We can't be held to the numbers. It could go one way or another, but approximately a $2 million cost differential.
Well, 2 to 3. I mean, I think we should give them the high number.
The high number is 2 million.
high
No, the high number was 2.9 plus a
The
couple hundred.
2.1 to 2.9, but other one will also cost 1.2 to 1.6.
Right, Mr.
So
Beneke,
the
that's why we have Mr.
difference-
Beneke here to speak to
You're
that.
talking the difference, right?
It's $2 million. He said net,
Okay,
$2 million
2 million is
difference.
on the high side, the difference.
okay.
Mr. Beneke, do you want to just speak to that really quickly for us?
That's true.
2 million,
$2 million.
On the high
okay,
side.
on the high side. Okay, so that's important to
I
know.
just have a question. I don't remember doing surveys like this. How do we prevent ballot stuffing?
You
Let
don't.
the Democrats do it.
Generally, you
I mean,
don't.
you've seen the surveys on,
Yes.
like Insider NJ, where, you know, somebody could just hit refresh like a zillion times.
Is there a way we can have it set to a,
With their name and address?
their name and
Yeah.
address?
That's normally what occurs.
Yeah.
Name and address.
Yeah.
And then I think there should be also just like a general comments section.
We want to make
That
sure
if somebody
township
wants to
residents
add a
are doing
comment.
it,
Yeah,
right?
like it's
We
just
want to
like
make sure
number one,
township
and then-
residents are doing it, not outside.
Yeah, but again, it's a form that you fill out. It's, I mean, it is,
So it sounds-
it is as
it's not,
fallible as it, you know.
So you have to say who you are. It's not.
Correct, but,
It's not
and
anonymous.
you can put your, right, you can put your address and we've done this in the past.
Just did it for the open space, right? We had a survey out there.
Correct. Yep. So the only question I would ask is then how long would this survey be out?
I think it has to be quick. I don't think we, 2 weeks, 2 weeks tops. 2 week survey. That gives us, so we should almost have it closed out before our next meeting, so we can discuss it at our next meeting. And then we can also have that information readily available for when we have to go to court,
Which is the same.
which is the same date, which is October 3rd. So maybe we close the survey out on October 1st.
That would be a
October 2nd. Because those numbers you can easily grab, and we can have that, we can say, we've done our due diligence. Okay, great, good.
Okay.
So we're gonna take a 5-minute break, and then we're gonna come back and start with public comment. Max has got it, man. All right, you ready? So let me just make this one announcement, Max's dad, and then we're gonna let Max speak at public comment first, because Max has school tomorrow. So you're gonna give me 1 second so I can read this into the record. When invited to speak to offer your comments, please come to the lectern, clearly state your name and whether you're a Milburn resident. Please do not provide your full address, seeing our meetings are recorded and are readily available to the public. For the convenience of our community, there is a remote option. If you called in and would like to comment, please press *6 now. If you are attending by computer or electronic device, please click the raise hand button and be sure your video is on when you comment. All members of the public wishing to speak will be put into the queue to address the committee. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers shall limit their comments to 1 3-minute session. You will be prompted when there's 30 seconds remaining. A reminder that this is not a time for dialogue or to debate a matter, and this is a time during a business meeting for the public to offer comments. After the conclusion of public comment period, and if they wish to, professionals and committee members may respond to comments made by the public. Members of the public are welcome to contact the Township or Township Committee at any time outside of our business meetings for requests for information or with questions. A reminder, we are all neighbors and personal attacks, of course, are strongly discouraged. I will now open the public comment period. Please.
Ben Rabunsky, I live in the Wyoming section just south of Ridgewood. Ali and I are here, and Max and my mom, and we're representing dozens of other parents in the area who have noticed that the intersection between Ridgewood and Cypress has always been dangerous, but increasingly more. Our neighborhood has turned over from rental homes into more established owners that have 5- and 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds up and down the block. And we all cross back and forth across that intersection every day, twice a day. Ali is the crossing guard there also, so he sees it more. And there was an incident last year. We had 2 accidents on one day. So I just wanted to call awareness to it. My son would love to walk to school when he's in 3rd grade, but I'm not going to let him if there is not a 4-way stop there. So it's a big thing for him. That's why he's here.
All right. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
I want to add a couple of stuff. Both Ridgewood Road and Cypress Road are getting much busier every single day, used by the commuters. The traffic starts around like 4 a.m. in the morning. Especially Friday afternoons and pre-holidays are the busiest and where people are impatient and careless. And 2-way stop sign, most of the drivers don't know that's a 2-way stop sign. And sometimes they do carry on. I have witnessed a couple of accidents while I was doing my duty. So it's very dangerous and has to be taken care of as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Max, you got a few words for us, or you good? You're good? Well, thank you for coming tonight, Max. Thank you so much. Good job, Max.
Hi, Max.
Sweet dreams. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. I just want to start by thanking.
And you
guys
are?
Oh, sorry, for Cal DePerna. I live in the Poet section, which will be relevant. Thank you so much for your service to our community. I mean, this is my first time here. And my only other time was when I came for a police conversation with the community about some of the increase in crime and what was being done. And in that moment, I was inspired by our mayor and by the police chief to start a neighborhood watch in the Poet section. And we've done that, but we've done that together. And some of my fellow community members are in the back who want to speak as well. But we wanted to raise some awareness to this. One, to thank everyone for the support. The police have been phenomenal. Sergeant Barbosa has been our liaison, and he is just communicating with us all the time. Our mayor, Maggie Miggins, has come with Sergeant Barbosa to come and do some educational sessions for us and just talk to the community. It's just been a phenomenal experience for us and figuring out how to protect our neighborhood. I know that recently Knollwood is starting a watch and South Mountain is starting a watch, and there's some other conversations going, but it's hard to articulate how this has brought us together. There were 2 incidents last week, which were I think really showcased how we could be a community. And we had, you know, Sergeant Barbosa called us to sort of communicate on what was happening. It was really helpful for us to know what to do and how to behave and how to help. We have seen increased patrolling. We have seen dedication. The police have stopped by to sort of talk to us. And I wanted to thank everyone who's been helpful in that cause, especially our mayor and the police department. I don't think that like people stand up enough and thank, and that's all we want to do is just thank you from our community to yours. We have really come together and saw the power of a lot of recent events, how we can just be tighter and watch out for each other, pick up our packages and check for camera footage when needed. And that's it. Just a sincere thanks to the Millburn Police, to all of you, and that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. There will be a neighborhood watch at the library. Mr. Perna, I believe you're going to be there, where there's going to be Sergeant Barbosa. If indeed you're listening to this meeting and you would like to start a neighborhood watch within your neighborhood, that meeting is taking place on the 26th at the Millburn Library at 7 p.m. if you have any interest for your neighborhood. Thank you.
Praveen Kandulam, Poet Section, Short Hills. I want to echo several of the sentiments that Raquel had already brought out. I just want to say a few words of appreciation for our police department. I have been here in Short Hills for almost a decade. And I guess 9 of those 10 years, I was blissfully ignorant, going at 7 o'clock in the morning, coming at 7 at night, and not knowing what the crime statistics or whatever those things were. A series of unfortunate events have actually brought us all together, and thanks to Raquel and Mayor Miggins and Sergeant Barbosa, they were able to come up with this watch group that has helped bring the community together, but also helped us actually know our police officers and our police departments a little bit more closely. I know, Mayor Miggins, you have come to several of these meetings of awareness within our own community. And in those meetings with the police department, we came to know of several common sense things that we can do to actually help our police department do their jobs a little easier. In fact, in those meetings, we came to know how common sense defying laws exist that makes our police department's job that much more difficult and frustrating. And despite that, they still come back and do the same job to keep us safe and protected. In fact, when I see a police person around, I feel so much more assured that I can actually go to bed easier. And nowhere was this better highlighted than a recent event that had happened just barely last week, where at almost midnight, there was a whole show of force when I think a theft or a house robbery, whatever was going on. The whole police staff, it appeared that almost the whole police had come by and made sure that the area was safe. All the investments that the township had put in terms of technology, whether it was drones, heat sensing equipment, or card readers, or whatever things that we don't even know were happening, were pretty much at full show. So that even though it was late at night, and after almost 2 hours of aggressive policing, we could really see that we can actually sleep well at night just because police did their job. But most importantly, many times when when things don't go right, they're very easy to pick up on the police. But when they do things right, they're not actually recognized as much. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank the entire police department and the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hello, my name is Pooja Trivedi Parikh. I reside in the Poet Section as well in Short Hills, and I just wanted to add a little bit more to what Raquel and Praveen have already shared. I'm also a member of the core team for the Poets Watch, and we've seen some significant improvement in terms of community relationships, in terms of engagement, safety. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight is Raquel took a really big step to kind of make sure that we have people on our group that are vetted and that we know live in the neighborhood, to prevent outside I guess people from looking into the information that we share. But currently we have about 400 homes and 300 that are registered into our entire group as a whole. So part of that is that they get access to, we keep informational files, checklists, things that could be of help. Our meetings with the police have been really good. Mayor Miggins, I know you've also attended and offered that support and information, and I know people look forward to it. It's something that's had a really positive impact on community engagement. And I think we're expanding and we're hoping to kind of add more activities just to continue that engagement. And I think if there was one more thing I'm forgetting, but over and all, it's just great because when we see the officers, it builds that sort of camaraderie. I certainly feel better. My husband travels often, so I'm home with my 6-year-old. It's nice to know that we're safe. And when we see them out in the community, we can make that connection. So it goes beyond just our sort of section. It kind of builds on relationships outside of it as well. Like at National Night Out or Oktoberfest, we just continue to see some of the officers, and it's good to have that sense of community and that they're a part of it as well. So I know we have an officer here, so thank you so much. And I think that's it. I will let someone else take the mic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Carlos Pierre. I also live in the poet section. And again, I wanted just to echo what my friends are pointing out here, which is a huge thank you to the police department and the amazing work that they're doing. The truth is, just like we just said, or actually my friend here, you don't realize how important they are until you need them. We did have an incident last week where there was a car that was stolen. They apprehended one individual, but 2 others ran away, and they were actually running through the poet section's backyards. And the police was trying to catch them. So first of all, the watch was amazing at staying in contact, like where is the action, where people need to perhaps lock their doors or make sure the kids are in the backyard. And we're talking 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I've also been living in this town for 14 years, and I never have to think about when my daughter gets off the bus from school that I have to be home, because who knows what could be happening if a car is going to be stolen, if there are people running. And the police they do an amazing job at keeping us safe. So thank you so much for that. The watch is amazing, and thank you to the mayor and detective who were honestly able to facilitate and energize the group to kind of come together and be armed with knowledge and know what to do in these, difficult circumstances when they do happen. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. We love our police. Sir, yes, please.
Thank you very much.
Good evening
to everybody. My name is Alex Bakinos, and I'm living here for 5 years ago. I want to discuss the major topic of this evening, building this residential building here. Over there, you permit to build this building, overcrowded the city. I'm building engineer. There is no, my colleagues here to discuss this one. Not only build this one, but working over there probably is illegal immigrants, not the union guy. Now you discuss to build second building and to kick off the Trader Joe. How are you doing, Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Mayor, this one? Overcrowded the city here. This Milburn Avenue is now overcrowded from Springfield here. Why build this one here in the center? There is no space in this township. I came from Westfield to find better place here. And I found you discussing for several months, building something. The governor chose this township to build affordable buildings here and promises to someone to be state assemblyman or maybe to replace as soon as possible Mr. Menendez, United States Senator, this one. I don't know how you discuss, give permission to, this is not the job, build this building, this one affordable. People coming here, coming probably the crimes. Now we discussed it next to the big place to build, maybe next year Trader Joe. How are you doing this one, people? You discussing this one, discussing this one. This is not good for this township to build too many residential buildings. If you find some building engineer, some architect to advise you how to make this place better, you're not going to do this one. And there is coming election, and people is talking always about this one. Now, mostly people who are like registered Democrat, now they will vote for the Republican here, candidate for this one, only for this one, and you're not running anymore. You're not running anymore. Run you, and you're losing this one here because of this topic here. Overcrowded is township. People take it to the police. Luckily, the police is very good here, much better than Camden or next Maplewood. There is no question. There is question about this one. More and more people coming here in residential building. This is small township. Just like to build in Berkeley Heights residential building. It's not going like this, the same way. Same is to Westfield, Union County. You're going to study this one for 2 weeks. They dump here maybe for 100 years very dirty dirt, and now you're going to solve this problem and people have to pay here. Same is here. 3-bedroom apartment, $1,000 rent. Who's going to pay the rest? The state, or maybe we, the resident here, and over there too. How these children will get as soon as possible to school when you build their residential building?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming this evening. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Phil. I also live in the Poet section. I did attend both of the Crime Watch, and I welcome, thank those people for hosting it. I wanted to make some comments about the reports. I'm very happy after 3 years that we're going to have monthly operating revenue reports. But will you share that with the public? You know, when you have when you attach it to the agenda packet, because other municipalities do that. Also, when we've heard about long-term tax exemptions. For the last 2 years, I've been talking about there's a prerequisite before that, and that's a policy and procedure ordinance about how you grant them. And that's a best practice. And I think before we grant the long-term tax exemption to RPM, you need to have a policy as to what the procedure is and what about the net financial fiscal impact studies. As to tonight's agenda, again, on the bill list, there's certain costs that goes back to the fair share housing settlement and implementation. I think we need to have a cumulative knowledge of how much money we're spending. We were talking about the Orange Reservoir Agreement. I'm happy that it's there, but Orange, because I watched what they do, they attached the agreement. And the question is, why didn't we attach the agreement that the public can see it? Because that ties into, like, with the identification license agreements, that the public should see what those agreements are before you approve it. And rather than you delegating the authority to the municipal attorney or the engineer to approve an agreement, that's your responsibility. I don't know if you can delegate that authority. As to topology, I'm happy that you're having a change order, but why don't we attach the proposal that it does say there's a sentence in there that's going for the, forget the rental, idea, that we attach the proposal to it so we know what it's there. So let's say something happens that we don't have to scurry about, we know what the exact purpose is. As you're going out for professionals for RFQs, the question, who decides what newspapers you're going in, the timing and of that framing? Will there be a group that involve it, or are you going to delegate that to the BA like in the past? Because it's very important. I think that you're getting the sense from the public that they really want, why maybe to invite different solicitation for our various professionals. I know my time is limited, but you might want to look into over compliance and the delay in producing the 6-month report, the appraisal for, I think, on the other street, because the public, before we go into the bond ordinance, needs to see the appraisal. That needs to be part of the record, I think, at your next meeting. And also at the last meeting, I'm not sure, did you approve the $600,000 bond ordinance for the DPW site? I don't recall that it happened. I think you skipped over it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phil.
Hi, Ben Stoller, Millburn resident. A couple things. One, I had actually mentioned that site at Myrtle and Cypress about a year ago, I believe. And you did send a police officer out there and did some, I guess, viewing of it. What I'd like you to do is also reiterate the SDL site, which you guys have put up, because I think that's probably the most effective way to get change and hold the town accountable as well. So there is a record of it. So little Max, before he goes to sleep, figures out the SDL site. back to the discussion we had earlier. Our companies have built many plants, and the devil's always in the details. What I'd like to make sure you guys provide the details are those 3 gas tanks. The gentleman who was up here very quietly said those are excluded from everything. Well, we know what's going on with Exxon Vauxhall. And if we don't, that's been under remediation since what, 1975? I don't know, it's at millions and millions of dollars. So let's get into the devil of the details, understand those 3 gas tanks and why the samples weren't done under those. If that's going to be extra money, I implore you to put it into the survey that's going to go out, that we don't know what that exposure is for those 3 tanks, because we don't. Correct? Look for the answer on that. That's about it. Thank you, and we support our cops. Always had a great job, experience at the Milburn PBA.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody, Christine Best, Milburn Township resident. I just had a couple of things I just want to go before I get into this road project. Maggie, you were great with your statement, like it was a couple of weeks ago, and I really thought it was awesome about, really hate has no place here in Milburn at all. And I completely support that statement. And I want to point out, I've just seen some signs talking about Republican extremism. And I feel like it's a very derogatory statement, and it's obviously directed at the 2 candidates in this room. And I think that those should be pulled. And that's just my opinion. There's a lot of people that are Democrats that actually vote for what's good for Milburn, and they're not necessarily party affiliated. I think it's really important. So I just want to throw that out for you guys to think about that. Then the other thing I wanted to just clarify in your statement today, I'm not sure who said this, so I apologize. In terms of the survey for the rec space, I think I actually brought it up in the meeting that it was an IP address that was the identifier, and that I had a major problem with that in terms of the adequacy and the transparency of like the number of people that could just sign on from different IP addresses and duplicate responses in the survey, and that wasn't a valid survey. And tonight you guys talked about people putting, and you specifically said, I think when in my response to that you guys couldn't take like people's addresses. And so tonight it's a complete flip. You're going to take addresses on this supposed survey. So what is it? I don't know what the standard is, but I think that we should, abide by a standard. So something for you guys to think about. And let me get into the road project. So I want to talk about this Milburn Township little poster that's on the website. They talked about site maintenance. Okay, I live in the Fairfield section of Milburn Township, and I've been going through this whole road project, which has been a nightmare. And so far, the township has done nothing to support both the contractor that has been hired by the township, which is Savelli and Sons, that's actually doing the paving and the curb work on Fairfield Drive. They have debris everywhere, so much so that I have even more tar on my driveway because I have to drive through it. And specifically, what's written in your site, it says site maintenance. The project sites will be maintained and cleaned each day. They are not cleaned at all. They haven't been cleaned since June or July. So Alex, you told me that I shouldn't be able to walk in the street, I think, because like it's a road and pedestrians don't walk the road. So I just want to bring that up. I also want to ask you, why is it that Fairfield Drive gets complete curbs, manhole covers, and new drains, sewers? Okay, please explain that to me. And that my street doesn't. Even though PSG, you guys wheeled and dealed a deal and you got them to pay for it, you still need to put curbs. And I want to direct you to your own law. Maybe, and I'm not an attorney. What?
Yeah.
Yep, what? I'm directing you to your own law. I'll give you a copy of it.
Give us a copy, thank you.
Yeah. Well, if you hadn't interrupted me, I would have been able to finish my statement, Maggie. Thank you so much. Always so pleasant. So here you go.
Okay. I'll send you notes. Thank you. Thank you.
Fran Feld again.
Hello.
I didn't get an answer from anybody but our attorney about whether any of you would want to live at 9 Main, but putting that aside. So I have a question, putting aside the contamination and the millions of dollars that somebody is going to have to pay for that site. I'm just going to interject something I brought up before when I first found out that it was 100% affordable, and just bring back my past as a social worker in New York years ago, when it was determined by a lot of people in the field of sociology and psychology that you don't put people all together in a building with that many people, that many units, who are all in the same socioeconomic group that needs assistance. Now, I believe in assistance for people who don't have the means to live in this town. I think it's great that there are a lot of buildings that will be diversified, but I still don't understand why this one building is 100% affordable housing. And what makes that even more curious to me is recently, Mayor, you spoke, well, you more than spoke, you were at a planning board meeting where you voted with the majority to delay, Annie says, because you felt the distribution of affordable units was unfair, that all the affordables were in the back facing the train, which, you know, isn't the best place to live. It's noisy, and you explained as a realtor, it's not ideal to live that way. But how is that not good in your mind to put off all the affordable people, 30 units in the back of a building and not distribute it evenly? But it's okay to check off, sign off on 100% affordable unit where they're all together in a building, which isn't good for people. That's my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Jay Morielli, Township resident. I want to speak tonight on the topic of gun violence prevention, which was a topic at last night's Millburn Board of Education meeting. Specifically, the question there was whether or not Millburn security staff should carry concealed guns. I realize that decision is not with this township committee, but instead with the BOE. However, the issue of resident and student safety clearly intersects both groups of elected officials. I'm not here to advocate for or against having armed security staff at the schools. Research into the effectiveness is mixed, and there's no clear consensus whether armed security staff prevent school shootings or gun-related incidents, and I do have studies if anyone is interested. With that said, we do know a few things. First, the vast majority of school shootings are committed by current or former students. Studies have shown that the majority of guns used in school shootings have come from the home of the individual or that of a relative or friend. Like the case in Virginia this past January, when a 6-year-old accessed his mother's unsecured gun and used it to intentionally shoot a teacher. So preventing unauthorized access to guns is critical. Storing weapons securely in a gun safe or lockbox, for example, is recommended by gun safety organizations. I'd like to commend the TC and police department for putting information on safe storage onto the township website. It is a great first step, but more can be done. Many cities and towns have sent information directly to the residents on the importance of safe storage. Here is an example from North Caldwell, a letter from the mayor to all residents in town stressing the importance of safe storage. So I asked the TC, please inform residents on the importance of safe storage in a similar manner that you have asked residents to lock their cars and take their car fobs. What is more important? Let's not wait for the incident and then react afterwards. Another important factor are warning signs. In many of school shootings, there were early indicators that the individuals involved showed early signs of concerning behavior. Detecting and providing support to those individuals is critical. Publicizing and encouraging use of the Say Something app in schools is one way to do this. Education on the use of red flag laws is another. Again, I commend the TC and Police Department for putting the information on this website. However, that's not enough. As an example, I was speaking to a lawyer that lives in town, someone well-known in the community, and we were discussing school shootings. And he said, if there were only something that could be done when we know someone is a danger. So I explained to him what the New Jersey Extreme Risk Protective Order Law was. In closing, I would like to ask this TC and any candidates running for election to raise these issues and discuss publicly what can be done. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Morale.
This is Chara Goyal, Melbourne resident. Speaking of community engagement, I actually wanted to remember 2 years back, we were hit by Ida on September 1st. And, I wanted to take a moment to remember all the destruction that was caused by Ida. It's been 2 years and it's the first TC meeting in September. And the sense of community engagement I saw where I witnessed firsthand while I was working with those families, helping them out, remove all the dirt and dust in their houses, removing the debris. It was a great community engagement. And I really want to applaud and thank everybody who came out together, rebuilt the homes, the aspirations of the small children. And I have found my family, like many family friends, especially in the South Mountain area. So I really commend all the efforts, and I wanted to thank everybody today after 2 years of Ida for the huge support that they had been providing to the families. And of course, thanks to our police personnel out here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Mr. Molman, we have somebody online.
Hi, everyone. Is it my turn? Sorry.
We could see you. Hi.
Okay, great. Hello, I'm Ross Field. I'm a first-time caller. I just want to say me and my family fully support Max and his father about the stop signs at Ridgewood and Cypress. My son's also in first grade. That is a very nerve-wracking street for me, a very able-bodied person to cross, and the four-way stop sign would help dramatically. Also, if you do that, please add many, many signs of warning. And I've seen other cities and towns where they paint very dramatic colors on the ground to show the box where you should not drive until you know it's safe, and the crosswalks. And same goes actually for Cypress and Wyoming, where people just drive. And I've seen the crossing guard many times almost get hit. There, as you know, there's documented proof, but there's many accidents that are there, and the drivers ignore the crossing guard, who has a big crossing guard sign. She wears yellow, she has a light. Sometimes when people stop, the person behind them will go right around them on either side, putting everyone at risk. So anything you could do to make it safer for pedestrians, drivers, we would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Sarah Sherman, resident. I wanted to clarify something. Mayor Miggins mentioned the meeting at the public library on the 26th. And fortunately, Mayor, we have the auditorium, since you've mentioned it. I would like to clarify that this is a meeting organized by the South Mountain Civic Association.
Yes,
It is our intention to begin our organizational work on a neighborhood watch. And we have invited many guests from other neighborhoods in town who are also interested in doing the same. And since she's there, I want to thank Raquel DePerna, who's been very generous in showing me and people in my group how Neighborhood Watch is set up, and we are looking forward to trying to duplicate something similar, because I do believe they've been very, very successful. So everybody knows about our meeting now, and
Thank you, Ms. Sherman.
it would appear that we will have room, and Sergeant Barbosa and Detective Salemi will be there to answer questions that people may have. Before I go, though, I have to say, I was not happy with Dr. Burton's presentation. I no longer have, and haven't for years, had children in the school system. And if there's going to be a referendum presented, people like me who've lived here for a very long time and who are expected to vote on these issues, and who are high information voters who take this very seriously. A 2-minute presentation to me telling me, okay, check out the back of the ballot, that's just not going to work. I know there are going to be more information sessions, but this was cursory at best. I was not able to attend the meeting at the Board of Ed last night, but we need more information than that. It's one thing to say your taxes are not going up, but that just won't do it. I need to understand this better, and I want to know why this was done so quickly, and there's so many of us who knew nothing about it. So that should not go unsaid. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sherman.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Harry Urso, Short Hills. I apologize if I've missed during the reports. Did Ms. Romano mention that each TC member actually received and reviewed the 2022 SID audit? Also during reports, did the BA or Mr. Vinayak address my safety concerns regarding lot 14? And also, what is the status of the removal of the original crosswalk on Milburn Avenue to Glenwood Ave? Is this now a situation that must be brought to the county? If so, I'm happy to make that phone call. I'd also like to ask, when did the TC approve former Mayor Lieberberg as a trustee of the SID board for calendar year 2023? And also, Mayor, can you please have Mr. Marazziti answer why Attorney Brewer consistently requesting through the courts leases that have actually no relevance to the statutory interpretation issue? Because in my opinion, this is harassment and a use of intimidation tactic, not to add a continual waste of taxpayers' dollars. When will this matter be mediated? Also, regarding the 9 Main Street, the presentation again seems like everything is after the fact. Everyone's catching up. And I really believe that this should be done over. It's not well thought through. You're constantly, in the old Italian saying is, you don't buy the cart before the donkey. So I think that you really need to look into this matter and really dot your I's and cross your T's, because it's unconscionable that anybody would approve putting any resident on any type of contaminated piece of property. You're going to own it. It's on you, not the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Urso. Gone.
No.
Mr. Carlin, good evening.
Good evening, folks. By the way, motorists go after old people also, because I've almost been hit several times, and they don't always go after crossing guards and young children too. Fewer points for older people, but that's the way it is. And they're Milburn residents on their way home from work who don't stop at stop signs. And they just go right through and go through double lines, 2 lines, that means you don't go through them. I mean, it's simple. Other thing is the resolutions. Mr. Marazini, you explain the resolution sometimes. I think that sometimes the folks that go ahead with the resolution should understand it more thoroughly. Sometimes they're a little bit complex and they should be more thought out by the, in other words, should understand what you're proposing before you actually propose it and read it. Because they are sometimes complex, rather than the last meeting, well, the bond issue, $2.5 million. Ms. Marzini, you explained it well, but it wasn't explained to the public before that. I think the public should have known a little bit more before you had to explain it on the resolution. It's my only comment. Thank you very, very much. You have a great evening.
Thank you, Mr. Carlin. Thank you for coming.
Hi, I'm Frank Sacamandi, and I'm a resident of Short Hills. So it seems that we're talking about the dump again, and we were talking about the same issue a year ago. And some of the same questions are coming up. But what I'd like to know is, why are we only getting the options for remediation now? I mean, we've known that the site was going to have to be remediated for a long time now, right? We've had environmental testing that was done. It was a 1,000+ page document that had findings of contamination. So this township committee knew that this was going to have to be dealt with. Well, you know, it's interesting that now you guys want to put out a survey to ask the town which direction they want to go with regards to cleanup. Why wasn't this done a year ago? Why wasn't this done in time so that we could have a proper referendum? Because a survey is easily manipulated, right? Any one of our high school CS students could probably download a list of names and addresses, feed them into your survey with a bunch of bogus results. I really don't think it would take them all that long to program something, considering, you know, the survey forms that I've seen this township put out aren't really the most secure things. So I really think that this is something that should have gone to a referendum, but you guys have dragged your feet for so long. You know, the court has already admonished you guys for all the delays, and you guys have been given extension after extension. I don't think they're necessarily going to give you another extension. And in light of that, you know, I think it's really detrimental to the community that you guys have waited until now to get their input on this and to present the numbers and the facts and to let us know what the costs are. We've been asking for these costs for a long time now. So I feel it's kind of disingenuous to do this right at the end, right before decisions have to be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sacramenti.
Richard Seibert, resident of Melbourne. So to add what Frank just said, so in putting out this choice, let's do it this way or this way, why don't we include that we're selling the property for $1 and we're collecting no taxes? We're getting a pilot. Let's see what the residents think about that. Because, you know, I talk to residents and no one knows, you know, a lot of people don't even know what's happening on the dump. Which is interesting, that people don't even know this building's being built. Another thing, I walk my dog 3 times a day. I live in the South Mountain section. I saw this sign that says, "Stop Republican Extremism." I do a lot of reading. Could someone up here explain to me what Republican extremism is? My household are Democrats, believe it or not, Democrats. My neighborhood is Democrats, South Mountain. People are disgusted by this sign. And anyone that puts that sign in front of their house can't believe it. On the sign, it says, put out by the Short Hills Democratic Committee. I asked Mr. Kramer, who put out this sign? Is it from the state or from the town? He said he thinks it's from the state. I asked him, so Governor Murphy's behind this? Because if it's true, the sign says vote line B. Line B is only for Essex County. So if it's for the state, it doesn't make any sense. So if anybody could explain to me, back to the beginning, let's put selling the property for $1, collecting no taxes. And we are, as Fran Feld, 75 units, all affordable. Now, back to the other thing, the sign. Who came up with this great idea to make that sign? It's a hate sign. It's really hate. Kramer said, and I'm bringing you up because we had a conversation. He said, well, the Republicans put out a sign that said, we don't want our town to be like Jersey City. He said that's racist. I would like to understand how that's racist. I think it's just overdevelopment. If you want to live in Jersey City, move to Jersey City. I moved to Milburn because it's a suburb. I don't want to live in a city. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Siebert. Enjoy the evening. I will now close the public. What is someone else? Oh, one more. So sorry about that. Ms. Stone.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
You just have to show yourself, Ms. Stone.
I know, I'm trying to.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
thank
there you are. We see you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Good evening.
Good evening. So thank you for not closing it before I got up, and it's been a long time since I've spoken. And I want to just let you know that about a week ago, I was coming home about 9 o'clock at night, and there was a tremendous police presence on White Oak Ridge Road. It turned out that they were, I guess, descended upon a stolen car. And as I was driving up Browning to get to my street, I noticed that there was police patrolling the area, which, you know, was very comforting. However, when I called the neighbor behind me, I found out that this was going on from the afternoon, that there was a car that was stolen, and that we were told to put our lights on, don't sit in the backyard. I normally in the evenings, I'll go in the back and light a fire and enjoy this gorgeous weather. I was told, no, you can't be outside, you must be inside. And I felt like this was like Pennsylvania looking for this murderer that was on the hunt. Totally not felt safe. I mean, it was nice show, and we have the best police force. I'm very pro-police, and they do the best we can. But instead of all these surveys and all these using the township taxpayer money to do these bogus surveys and projects, you know, wishful projects that you do, why don't you spend it on hiring more police officers to protect this town? That is where money is needed to go to, instead of using it to just look for information that is going to be useless, as Frank said. As far as this Republican sign, I am a Republican. I grew up as a Democrat. I can tell you that the Democratic Party that my parents belong to and I grew up as is not the party that I see in this town, because no Democrat that I grew up with would have put up a sign like that, which is to me a hate sign, that they are only representing the 51% of the town that voted for them. They're not representing the 100%. And to me, what's extreme is to select a candidate that never voted in an election, in a local election, and put her in charge of a $65 million budget that she's going to be possibly voting on. So I find that to be extreme politics, that you would do that when there were credible candidates that came forward that would have been much more suitable for the position than someone that's never voted in a local election. So living in this area for a very long time, I can tell you that that is not a comforting way to put front and center a candidate that is, to me, pretty extreme, not on her behalf, because I applaud her for even taking on the position of the Township Democratic Committee that they were ignorant enough not to check a voting record prior to putting a candidate in charge of a potential $65 million budget. So don't tell me that I'm extreme when clearly the extremeness is coming from your behalf, Ms. Romano.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. I will now close the public comment period. Ms. Prupus, do you have anything you'd like to respond to or have any?
I just want to make note that tonight there was up to 20 people attending on Zoom, so I'm just really happy we still have the Zoom capability. Oh, it is on. I just said that I wanted to make note that we had up to 20 people attending on Zoom tonight, and I wanted to just say I was really happy that we still have that capability in the township.
Thank you.
I sometimes feel, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So, we could have just made the decision, the five of us, and picked one of those two options. But certainly under the leadership of Mr. Vinayak and Ms. Prupus, who are tireless advocates for public involvement, we decided to go and do that. Now, we could just take the public in this room, but we all know that that's not representative of the town as a whole. So we decided, all right, we'll do a survey. But of course, now that's blasted. So I'm not sure, we'll do the survey, it'll show what it shows, but that's just the way it is.
Yes. Mr. Mariziti?
I have a few comments, yes. First, with respect to the tanks that were mentioned, it is correct that they have to be removed. It is correct that once they are removed, and only after they're removed will there be sampling there to determine whether there is soil contamination. I'm not the environmental consultant, but I've been part of the discussions about what the likelihood is of releases, and the likelihood is considered low because there has been no detected reduction in the quantity of fuel in the tanks, and that's a way to find out whether you have a leaky tank or not. With respect to the dollar sale price for the site, remember what we were talking about before, and that is whatever overage, whatever extra gap there is in the financing of this project is to be made up by the township. So the property could be sold for another $1 million or $5 million. It would just add to that amount that the township would have to pick up under the terms of the settlement agreement. And then lastly, with respect to the bond ordinance that we spoke about at the last meeting, that was information given at the early stage of the introduction of the bond ordinance. There will be a public hearing and second reading at the next meeting of the Township Committee. So that was information that was provided in advance of the public comment period. That's all I have.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Vinayak?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few answers, and thank you, Mr. Cohen. You're absolutely right. Even I feel the same way. You do, damn you do it, damn you don't do it. So, and this conversation is not just started a year ago. I've been here 3 years, and this conversation has been happening for 3 years. We've been talking about affordable housing, and we've been talking about Annie Says Building, 9 Main Street. Annie Says Building, I've said that in the past as well. With the builder, we were able to talk to them and make a senior living, affordable housing, quash that idea and made that as a regular housing building. It's not in our control. You have to reach out, and anyone can reach out, including us, to the state mandate. We talk about township elections here. Let's talk about state election too. Talk to your assemblyman, talk to your assemblywoman, talk to your state senator. This is a state rule that township, and it's not new, it's about 45 years old rule that township has not done anything about. And whenever I say that, there are some people always make faces, oh, come on, we did that. No, we did not. 2015, Upton Building was the first one ever gotten done. There was 30 apartments out of 200 apartments. Then we had Woodland that we actually had to settle here. And all the buildings that have been talked about, nothing was actually done by the township. All builders were with the affordable housing came to the discussion. We did not want to have this affordable housing 75 unit. We went back, there were a building that they wanted to make on the JFK Expressway that is still in question. We asked them to remove that because that builder was not on the table when this whole thing started. They came back saying, you're trying to act smart. We will make 75 units here. We will increase the density in entire downtown. And then we came back saying, you know what, 75 unit doesn't make sense. You're going to put every people, all the apartment in one building does not look good. Are you sure you know what will happen to the kids who will go to the middle school and high school from there? It's not enough already for kids to go to the high school, attend in that bully environment, or I'm not saying there's a bully environment, but how kids respond to each other. So they came back saying, okay, now you're in your senses. We will keep the 75 unit. You're going to keep the Woodmont is the one, JFK Expressway. This is what we are dealing with. I keep reminding everyone, and people just want to hear what they want to hear, to not understand or do not want to understand the holistic picture. At the end of the day, I live here as well. I'm a resident of the town, a taxpayer of the town. And if I am voting for something, there has to be something behind it. There's nothing self-motivated in here. So when people come in here and talk about, hey, how are you doing this? Absolutely, my question that way too. But please reach out to your state representation as well and talk to them. This is a state mandate that every town is going through, almost every town. And some town may be getting less of the affordable housing because they may have done already some, but everybody's going through it. So those on Annis's and 9 Main Street, survey versus no survey, do or don't do, it's the same. You will get under scrutiny. Whether you don't do it, you are the culprit. Or you do it, it's too late. Well, guess what? We'll still do it. Monthly revenue versus, you've talked about, I have not spoken about monthly revenue. I don't believe in monthly revenue. It's all taxpayers' money. I'm talking about monthly expenses. So the report that we have done for 3 years in Excel, where you can sort things out whichever way you want it, is by type, is by department, each line item is only for the expenses. How we do it, $65, $67 million, how we spend them, where all we are spending them. So that's all from me, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Romano? Thank you.
I just wanted to thank Ben and his dad and the others commenters for the final reading of ordinance 2646-23 tonight. And I look forward to the final reading, and I'm glad to be sitting up here taking part of it.
Thank you, Ms. Romano. Mr. McDonald?
So I'm really gonna only speak to one public comment. And again, repeat that the work that is, and I'm feeling a little bit in that damned if you do, damned if you don't situation when it comes to doing work on a particular street that was allocated in the capital budget of Fairfield Drive. The township has had planned to do a reconstruction of that road, which included curbing, drainage, and a mill and pave. PSE&G was in that neighborhood doing their own work. We have had a street sweeper up there. We are cognizant that construction is disruptive, that it is, but it is necessary in order to make progress on the work that we're doing. And I would just like to point out that, because this question keeps coming up, and I understand that the residents on Fairfield Terrace and the residents on Martindale are upset that there's not a full curb replacement of their streets. However, we have worked with PSE&G to make sure that there is a full mill and pave. I have expressed also that the option is that they not mill and pave it, and we wait until the township budgets for that work to be done and then for curbing to be placed. But I'd just like to point out what Ms. Best gave us in saying that we're not following our own laws and our own code. It says where curbing is to be installed or replaced. the standard curbing is this. We had no intention of replacing curb on Martindale or Fairfield Terrace. We are planning on having PSE&G mill and pave those streets. So that is all I can offer for it. If we continue to chase after every desire in a particular neighborhood and not stick to the project plan that we have, it will be an untenable situation.
So just to reiterate, Mr. McDonald, we had our engineering department, so we'll reiterate this for those who are home listening, 20+ people. And those that are sitting in the audience. The engineering department went out, ranked our roads from the worst to the best. And that's how we are every year doing projects for the roadways to be fixed. Instead of half-ass, as it were, road milling and paving, they're doing a full. So that, so something,
Money.
spending 3 times the money.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor
On
Benayak knows
infrastructure,
this.
yes.
So something like Highland Avenue, which has just been completed, Fairfield Drive, which is getting completed. There's other roads that are getting completed. Every road is ranked by our engineers. So the roads will get, so we could leave Fairfield Terrace and Martindale in deplorable condition, or we could have public service pay to mill and pave the whole road. They're just not getting curbing for now. And eventually
Correct.
someday they'll get curbing. Okay, that's great. That's great. Thank you. I just want to be clear that we've ranked the roads, let the township know we've ranked every road and we're fixing the roads one at a time. Okay, thank you. Anything else? No? Okay. Yes.
I wanted to say something else. I wanted to address, since I also sit on the planning board along with the mayor. I wanted to address the difference between why the Annie Says site was rejected, or it's not the right word, but whatever, not
Not voted for.
not voted for. So there's 2 ways that the state allows for affordable housing. One way is the 80-20, like Annie says, and the reason why it's such a big, you get so little affordable housing for such a big development is because that's the way the developers make a profit. In the other side, where it's 100%, there are all these grants, and that's, as Mr. Marizidi said, those grants will be applied for and whatnot, but those are not available if you're doing the 80-20. So we felt that the Annie Says development, where the developer will be making mega bucks from the market rate housing, should not then be allowed to stuff all of to do that, make that profit on the backs of the affordable units. And in essence, he stuck them all in the back, where you had to walk outside to get to the front door. There are all sorts of deficiencies in that area. We felt that that just wasn't right. And so what ended up happening is now they have come back. They have refigured the apartments. We'll have a new meeting. I don't know how it'll go, but obviously they took that seriously. And I think that's to our credit.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Okay. The township will now consider consent agenda resolutions. Are there any comments from the committee in regard to any items listed on the consent agenda? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve resolution 23-232 through resolution 23-240, which are listed on the consent agenda?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Prupus,
Yes.
Ms. Romano,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Benayak,
Yes.
Mayor Miggins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Resolution 23-241 to revise the 2023 Township Committee meeting schedule for the November meeting. Are there any comments from the committee in regards to resolution 23-241?
I just kind of have a problem a month before the change in the meeting, changing it. And I don't think I'll be able to make that meeting because of prior plans. So we get the calendar at the top of the year. I think that something like this should have been noted much earlier, because I will regret not being able to make it. So I'm not in favor of changing the meeting. And it's also the Tuesday night right before Thanksgiving. So I'm sure many of the people in our community will not be able to attend. It's the highly travel week or preparation week. And I think it's not in the best interest of our community to change the meeting.
Thank you. Anybody else have any other comments?
we would do a prior date if needed. Right, we are changing the date because 3 of the 5 will not be here at the NJLM meeting. We will be there in Atlantic City. So if the later date doesn't work, maybe we can do a prior date. So,
Great.
so the
Let's
meeting can
do-
happen.
Can we do a prior date?
No? Well, let's just vote on this. So we'll,
And the meeting doesn't start till the next day, so I don't know why everyone's going to Atlantic City on Tuesday.
It starts in the morning, so that's fine, leave it then.
What?
Originally it was on the Monday, the week before.
Oh, the meeting's on Monday?
The first meeting was, originally it was
Oh,
always.
So if the meeting's on Monday night, why?
Traditionally was on Monday.
because
Why don't we?
members of the
Monday?
Township Committee have asked that it's gotten moved, so that's why it's up here.
Right, got moved saying that because they were going to a conference, but if the conference starts on Wednesday, so the conference starts on Tuesday, I still don't know why everyone's going on Monday night.
So here we're gonna go. We had comments from members of the committee. So we'll vote on it. May I have a motion to approve resolution 23-241? May I have a second? Second. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Prufus,
No.
Mrs. Romano,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Bernaya,
yes.
Mayor Miggins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ordinance 2646-23, Ms. Romano, you are scheduled to sponsor ordinance 2646-23.
I present for consideration an ordinance which was amended at our last meeting on September 5th, entitled Ordinance 2646-23, Ordinance amending and supplementing the Township of Millburn Development Regulations and Zoning Ordinance. Tonight is the time for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with law.
Okay, I declare the hearing open.
So Mayor. may I-
So I think we'll wait till after we declare the hearing, right? See if there's any public comment first.
Sure.
Thank you. Any public comment on ordinance 2646-23?
Can you recap it?
Do you want
What is
to?
the-
Graham, Mr. Petto,
Yes, good evening.
good evening. Would you recap that first, please? Thank you. Our planner's on the phone, Mr. Moriarty.
Would be happy to. Good evening, Mayor Miggins, members of the Township Committee, Graham Petto, serving as Township Planner this evening. The ordinance before you this evening, ordinance 2646-23, is the product of the Township's Zoning Code Examination Subcommittee and presents revisions to the front yard setback regulations, replacing the 40-foot standard front yard setback for a calculated prevailing front yard setback for variation and neighborhood context purposes to preserve community character. The second component of the ordinance amendment before you, this evening, is also to constitute a maximum number of stories for residential development. Presently, the township does not have a maximum number of stories regulation within the residential zone districts. There is a maximum height numeric value, but there is not a maximum number of stories above grade. And as a follow-up to the meeting at the last meeting that we had regarding this matter, Mr. Benayak asked the question if the Zoning Code Examination Subcommittee concurred with the Planning Board amendment to just establish the prevailing front yard setback. I did speak with members of the Zoning Code Examination Subcommittee, and they support the Planning Board's amendment and find concurrence with the establishment of the prevailing front yard setback.
Mr. Pedro, I'm part of that committee as well. You spoke with me. I wasn't in line with what you were talking to me about. So not the entire
Yes.
committee.
Did not mean to characterize your comments, Mr. Benayak, as you're present this evening. Mr. Benayak, obviously has a different opinion regarding that matter. Apologies on that.
Mr. Moriarty, did you have a question?
I do, Jay Morielli, resident. So question for Mr. Petto, and I picked up on this at the last meeting. Is it the case that we are eliminating a set distance for the front yard setback and saying now that your front yard setback can be in line with the average of your 6 adjacent properties? And if so, without requiring a variance. And that's the key part. So in the past, my understanding was if you wanted to do development to change your property, your building, so that it was within the 40 feet, you would go and get a variance. Now you'll be able to move your property forward to the average of your 6 adjoining neighbors. That in turn, if I understand it correctly, then reduces the average, so that your next neighbor then could move even closer because the average has gotten lower. When your neighbor moves closer, then everybody else can move closer. And then eventually everybody ends up with where the closest house is. Then the first time someone goes in and asks for a variance, that resets the process. So eventually there will be no front yards because people will just keep moving forward and forward. And once the first variance is granted, everyone else can move forward. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Hold on, Mr. Pedo?
Sure, happy to clarify. And that this, Mr. Morreale raises an excellent point. That actually was the subject of discussion that the planning board had regarding the prior language that was contained within the ordinance. The prior version of the ordinance did allow for greater flexibility and allowed for encroachment of, stoops or porches to extend forward of the prevailing front yard setback calculation. However, the planning board recommended that language be eliminated and that the prevailing front yard setback be the required minimum front yard setback for all residential zone properties within the township to prevent the creep, as Mr. Morreale is alluding to. Requiring the prevailing front yard setback calculated average for the 6 adjacent properties creates a unique setback value for every property within the township that will respect and conform to the neighborhood context and character. Presently, there is a variance process for any development within 40 feet. This will eliminate a variance process for homeowners in smaller lots with more reduced front yards. Obviously, this is a very important step to eliminate the burden of seeking a variance for minor improvements to the front of dwellings. But the zoning board of adjustment does still exist to adjudicate and determine variance relief where significant deviations of the prevailing front yard setback would be required.
So the planning board set forward wanted the ordinance changed to avoid the creep, and that's what this in essence has done, is it will avoid the creeping forward as Mr. Morreale is talking about.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Pettit, would you just again explain, since Mr. Morale disagreed, would you again explain how it eliminates the creep?
It doesn't.
So
It doesn't. I'm a part of zoning committee as well, so I can actually talk as well once you're done, Mr. Pettit.
yeah, so I mean, in order for the creep to happen, once you calculate the average for these 6 adjoining properties, say you come up and the value is 25 feet. In order for you to go forward of 25 feet, you need to seek a variance from the zoning board of adjustment. Now, the value will vary for different properties to the left or right of each property. So each case is going to be unique. It would require a significant adjustment of those 6 different properties adjoining each property to move forward in a great distance in order to reduce the average calculated value significantly. The prevailing front yard setback calculation that we're proposing here within this ordinance is a standard that is used in communities around New Jersey. It is not something unique and new in this process. It is unique in that it allows and affords homeowners the ability to, do some minor modifications to the front of their property that's in line with the context of the neighbors and the surrounding community and surrounding properties. But we want to make sure that we protect the neighborhood character and also eliminate the burden that the Board of Adjustment has been experiencing with such a significant and frequent request for front yard additions.
So what, Mayor?
Please.
So what I've understood this, I think we have missed a major mark here. And for example, again, I used an example last time as well. If there are, and we are going to use the 6 houses average. So if in my zone, it's 40 feet behind is what the standard is right now. If there are 3 homes, 25 feet, and the 3 homes, 40 feet, I don't even have an option but to make 32.5 with the new average that we are talking about. It eliminates that I can make it still at 40. I will have to make it at 32.5. I think this wording has been missing from the new law that or ordinance that we are trying to reinstate. We should give that option as well. And what Mr. Morelli said, if there is any home there that are in front and that they're back, you will have to make in the middle of the existing homes, because that is the average, 100%. You don't have any leeway there. If it is 25, 25, 25, 40, 40, 40, the next home that you're going to make will be 32.5. There is no different designation that you can put. If you want to make 25, you cannot. If you want to make 40, you cannot.
You can.
No, you cannot. That's
It
where,
doesn't have to-
no, it
doesn't have to-
eliminates that
It can be
line.
less, it doesn't have to be.
No, it eliminates that. It has to be average. We eliminated that 40 feet requirement completely.
No, but you don't have to build, if you want to build 40, you can still.
You're
do
saying
that.
it, but in the rule, it's not.
Mr. Petto, would you speak to that, please?
No, so to clarify, properties are allowed to are permitted under the draft ordinance language to be constructed behind the prevailing front yard setback line. That is permitted to move rearward of the prevailing front yard setback line. What we've done in the modification is to eliminate the allowance to move forward of the prevailing front yard setback line.
That's really not the case, because when we were discussing this, there were a few homes that were made way behind in the lot, and they were not happy with it. So they did not want those people to be making the house way behind in the lot. That's why they came up with 85% leeway. So where you could actually move a little bit front or back. With 100%, you don't have any leeway there at all. So you are going to make at 32.5. This is the discussion we had in our subcommittee zoning board.
You can't be forced to put your house at 32.5.
Exactly my point too.
If you want to make it at 35, that's up to you. You don't need a variance to go less than the requirement. You need a variance to go more than the requirement.
Is that the case in the ordinance? Because I don't think that is the case.
I think it would help if we kind of clarify a couple of things. So one, the first is that the amendment that was discussed and set forth is to amend the minimum front yard setback requirement that is within the ordinance. So the minimum front yard setback requirement is now the prevailing front yard setback average as proposed. Separately, and apart from that, as Mr. Vinayak is alluding to, there is a maximum front yard setback requirement now, whereby a dwelling can't be set back further than 125% of the prevailing setback line. So you can't locate a new home adjacent to rear yards, or locate a new dwelling, way at the back of a lot that's adjacent to the backyards, where you have side windows looking down into the yard. That was a concern that was expressed at the Zoning Code Examination Committee by the zoning officer and other members as well. So first, I think it's important to distinguish that the amendment that we're talking about is related to the minimum front yard setback. So that's the smallest amount of distance that we can have. Separately and apart there is proposed to be a maximum front yard setback line, but that is rear of the prevailing front yard setback and does allow for leeway and freedom in locating the dwelling on the property. And again, this is really pertinent language that's related to construction of a new home. Existing homes already have front yard setback, and are existing in their current state. And by modifying these regulations for the minimum, we're kind of, respecting what's the existing character of the neighborhood and what's already built on the ground for these properties.
That put me at ease. Thank you. Because it was discussed in that meeting.
Okay,
May I?
Mr. Morreale, please do.
Yeah, so Graham, if someone modifies their home and moves the front closer to the curb, in line with the new regulation, which allows them to move within 40 feet without a variance, because the average for the adjacent homes, let's say, is 35 feet. So let's say they move their home to 35 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Does the average now get reduced for the rest of the properties, the 6 adjacent properties, because he moved from 40 feet to 35 feet?
Not necessarily, it depends on what's on the other side of their houses.
The 6 adjacent properties
But
will
it's
remain, the
6
six adjacent
You
properties
have 1, 2,
remain.
3, 4, 5, 6, right? And 6 moves up, right? That the 4, 3, 2, 1. If you're looking at house number 2, you got to go to the other side too, that were not part of that.
So let's say I'm in the middle.
You will not.
3 houses to the left, 3 houses to the right. They are all at 25 feet, I'm at 45 feet. I can move up to 80%.
No, 100%, 25. It is 100%. Planning
Okay,
board
so
has
I can
changed it
move,
to 100.
I can move up to 25 feet.
Yes, that's right.
Now the average has been lowered, right?
25. It is still 25 because everyone.
So
is
now
25.
everybody has moved up to 25 feet.
Actually,
stick
you
with
could not
me.
even move to 25.
Well, like I said, it was the average. It wasn't 25 feet but let's say it's 28 feet. So the next person says, listen, I'm at 25 feet. I'd like a variance to move to 20 feet.
And that will.
Now the average changes for everybody.
And it depends, the next person has a different set of houses.
No,
It depends what the other houses are.
House to my right.
There would have to be a variance approved on it.
Exactly, but when that variance is approved,
That's right.
then the average moves up.
That's right.
That's all I'm saying. That's the simple point, that by doing it, the first time you create a variance ahead, everything gets to move up, and that's
So
all.
I think it's important to kind of just, in response, I'd like to just comment a couple of things. First, thank you, Mr. Morale, for your comments. I appreciate the time that you've taken to address the Township Committee on this matter. I think that it's difficult for us to opine how the Board of Adjustment may interpret, variance relief related to front yard setbacks. I think given the proposed amendment that is before us this evening, there will be much greater flexibility and relief afforded to smaller lot, homes and the front yard setback there that is associated with those properties. And I anticipate that the board, most likely will not be favorable to grant deviations beyond. What we've done here is created flexibility and to set a new precedent to respect existing character and respect the existing built conditions within neighborhoods. So it would be very, very difficult, I believe, for an applicant to move that far beyond the established prevailing front yard setback. But I would also like to just advise that, the municipal land use law requires the Board of Adjustment to provide an annual report to this body, to the Township Committee and to the Planning Board on cases that they adjudicate. If we do start seeing, issues related to significant variance relief being awarded to properties for the front yard setback from the prevailing front yard setback calculated average, we can take action, and we can revisit this and correct course should things be moving in a negative direction. But I think the purpose of this in the interim is to correct the issue that the board is seeing now, which is a significant number of requests to deviate from the 40-foot fixed front yard setback, which is not a true front yard setback of many homes within the township, particularly those in smaller lot neighborhood areas.
Yes.
Hi, Ben Stoller, a resident Milburn. My home was built in 1872. It is on the Historical Preservation Committee. I know there's a lot of hubbub about the 300 plus houses being designated as historical by Mr. Kramer. Will those also be subject to the same rule, or are they not?
Every house is subject to this.
So all historical preservation houses are subject to every rule. They come through. Okay, I just want to make sure I understand it. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Vinayak, do you have anything else you want to add to it?
So the second part to this is the 2.5 stories that we have not discussed. The house cannot have 3 stories going forward. So that's another part of the rule. And on the historic preservation, I don't know, why not? Yeah. Read it, and I'm not putting in reasons there. That is what was discussed. I'm trying to relay the message.
It's what the
So-
subcommittee had stated they
Yes.
wanted done. Right, it was the subcommittee who was head of zoning,
Right. There are
members of the planning.
Yeah.
This is what this subcommittee came up with. So, Mr. Petto, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, I can certainly speak to that. Residential ordinances around the state often contain both 2 height requirements. One being the calculated height of a building from base grade at the ground level up to the peak or top of a roof element. And that's a height value that's expressed in a numeric number of feet height. The second is that, building mass is regulated in zoning bulk regulations across communities throughout New Jersey in a number of stories format. The most frequently used and the most common throughout the New Jersey is a 2.5-story maximum height for a residential dwelling. This is 2 full floors of living space with a half floor and an attic level with dormers. Presently, the ordinance is silent and does not include a number of stories figure, which permits a number of taller dwellings with flat roofs. And that was expressed as a concern and created some confusion regarding those types of construction within the code. So this was a recommendation that was put forth by the Zoning Code Examination Subcommittee to constitute a maximum number of stories within the ordinance. And furthermore, this ordinance also does add a maximum height value in feet for the R8 zone, which actually is silent. It does not presently have a maximum height value as well. So there is another technical correction in here.
So you got to, why not?
Okay. I move that this public hearing be closed.
I was waiting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Just want to make it fast. I just had a quick question on when you talk about 3 stories, you're talking about a flat roof, like a full story, because what about a gabled roof that would have like eyebrow dormers that could have a significant height? Does that count as a 3rd story? I was just unclear on that. And then I had a couple other questions.
Sure, no, happy to
Hold on
address.
1 second, let her ask them all at one time. Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
Beth.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
and then, one of them is just a comment, because I mean, going back to Mr. Morales' comment, I mean, I do think you'll have creep over time, and I'm just making a comment. I think the township, I've lived here for 27 years. It's really getting so overdeveloped. I mean, I call it the like rich people's row houses. It's so overdeveloped here. It's like, I don't know why people feel the need to build 7,500 square foot houses on 1/3 of an acre, whatever it is. I mean, it's like, move out to Burnsville if you want to do that. I just, it's too much overdevelopment. And quite frankly, if somebody even were able to build 10 feet, like if you take my entire road and I'm adjacent to somebody who's parallel to me, basically parallel to me, but then if you took the average and there were like 3 houses all the way down that were sticking out more, and the person adjacent to me was able to build out another 10 feet. And it wasn't just a portico, because it's one thing, you have to take each, that's why I think variances are really important, because there's so much subjectivity to aesthetics and how imposing that can be on somebody, because a portico is no big deal. If somebody's blowing out their entire frontage, another 10 or 15 feet, and it's now in front of your house, then your view is of like somebody's sidewall. And I think that the variance process should be continued, quite frankly, and people will just have to wait like everybody else. And that's just my opinion. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
listen to your answer, Mr. Petto. Thank you.
Mr. Petto, if you could give a response. please.
Sure, certainly. Thank you, Ms. Best. Happy to address your comments and questions. Regarding the first question, the height of the building and the stories, a gabled roof or a peaked roof with dormers, that would be considered a half story. So that is a style that's traditional in many older homes in Milburn. So 2 full, squared off floors and then a half story under a sloped roof, that would be permitted under this ordinance. That would not be considered a 3rd story. That would be considered a half story under a sloped roof with dormers. And again, to your second point, I'll just mention again, I think that the annual report mechanism from the Board of Adjustment will be invaluable in this process as we move forward. The Township Committee should be in receipt of that early in the 2024 calendar year, summarizing decisions by the board during this year, 2023, and we can start to see, some of the impacts of this legislative policy changes and whether course corrections or adjustments need to be made. I think the Zoning Code Examination Subcommittee has been a great conduit to discuss these matters and facilitate, issues that do arise. And I think the township will be acutely aware of, issues as we do see them to mitigate situations. So thanks everyone for their time. Any further questions? Happy to entertain.
Thank you, Mr. Petto.
Sure.
I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law.
May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Purvis?
Yes.
Ms. Romano?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Banayak?
Yes.
Mayor Miggins?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Romano, you are scheduled to sponsor ordinance 2647-23.
I present for consideration an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2647-23, Ordinance amending and supplementing Chapter 7, Traffic, Section 7-20, Stop intersections of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Milburn. The proposed amendment to the traffic ordinance is to authorize the installation of an all-way stop at the intersections of Cypress Street and Ridgewood Road. These all-way stops have been recommended by the Township of Milburn's on-call traffic engineer, Brightview Engineering, after the completion of a warrant study of the intersection. Tonight is the time set for public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with law.
I declare the hearing open. Any comments?
I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Karias?
Yes.
Ms. Romano?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Bernaya?
Yes.
Mayor Megan?
Yes, thank you. We have no old business. So for new business, we have an indemnification policy. Mr. Cohen, you wanted to bring this before the committee
I
for
did.
committee consideration and discussion.
I did. So I've heard about it, I've heard as the society becomes ever more so litigious. I've just heard from more than one case of township employees, questioning whether they would be defended and indemnified by the town. And I asked Alex to pull the policy, and he did. And I think the paragraph that I have a lot of trouble with is 2.2-46.4, where basically in certain circumstances, the person is required to lay out the money for the lawyer, and if everything goes okay, the town will reimburse this. And I question why that's necessary when we also have a paragraph at the end where it says if there is something where based on the outcome, there's been a crime or fraud or something like that, then if the town has paid money, the town is entitled to claw back the legal fees. So I think that's sufficient to handle that, and I don't think it's fair to ask employees, some of whom of varying means, to be on the hook for the lawyer, lay out money for a lawyer. That could certainly govern the quality of the lawyer that they're able to employ, because it's not always true. Better lawyers cost more. Nothing personal there. So anyway, I would like to see that paragraph eliminated and just hang everything on. If there's a crime, then obviously if we've indemnified them and they committed crime or fraud, then we get the money back, which is already in the policy.
Makes sense. Anybody have any questions about that? Thought processes? Mr. Marizzi, you're chomping.
No, I'm not shopping. You're talking about 2-46.4.
Correct.
Is that right? And that's a case where there's a criminal or a disciplinary action brought. And so I didn't draft this document, but I'm assuming that the idea there is that if, just for example, disciplinary action is taken by the township against the township official or employee, the township doesn't want at the same time to be financing that defense. But it does, as you say, if it's dismissed favorably, then they can be reimbursed, but they have to first
I
succeed.
think that's an undue burden.
It kind of cuts across the presumption of innocence.
Right, that's right.
But I'm just pointing out that that is in that limited situation where it's a criminal or disciplinary proceeding.
And it's from the township to a township employee.
Well, the township wouldn't institute a criminal.
Right.
A criminal, there's two different thoughts here. One is a criminal proceeding that's brought by the state. And a disciplinary action can be brought by the township. So you could have two different kinds of situations going on there. And you would be financing the defense of someone brought up on a crime.
Yes.
But my only point is to make it clear that that's what it is, not to argue one way or the other for that.
Is this like standard, Alex, you know if this is the standard indemnification of
every town?
Right, like, do we have any idea
Um,
how this compares or?
I do not. I do not know how it compares, although it does say at the beginning that it's consistent with the provisions of NJSA 59:10-1. Certainly able to do, some comparison of other municipalities and notification policies.
I guess it's all, it's kind of, when you read criminal disciplinary action, that's a wide range. What that means. I mean, it goes from, some kind of financial disclosure issue to, to theft.
Right.
So that's pretty extreme. And so that's really the concern.
I think I'm with Mr. Cohen on why does the employee have to take over the lawyer, and the type of lawyer he will take or she will take or they will take will be different than what township can help them with. And if
Because they wouldn't be in this situation if they weren't sitting up on the decks.
Right, and it says directly related to the lawful exercise of their official duties. And so that's, we already have the fraud exception at the back, so,
I think it's worth pursuing something on this, to look into this a little bit more,
Yeah.
Mr. Cohen, that's my humble opinion. Because if you're not sitting up here on the dais, you wouldn't have had this.
you wouldn't have done that.
That's right. So is there a way to look into this a little bit more, Mr. McDonald? If there's consensus.
I am.
Is there
yeah, we can.
consensus to look into this? Sure. Okay, there's consensus. If you look into it, that'd be great. Well, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion.